Will the commissioners please come to the dais at 6 o'clock? I'll get me. No, but I can get Sylvina to get them.
Okay.
She's outside making, she's in Michael's office making a copy.
Is she coming to come back?
Yeah, she's coming back to deliver the copies.
Oh, okay, so maybe we'll ask her.
Careful with that thing.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I'd like to call this City of Lake Worth Beach Utility Meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Mayor Pam Triolo is absent tonight. Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso.
Here.
Commissioner Scott Maxwell.
Here.
Commissioner Omari Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Here.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardy, will you do us the honor?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first up is electric utility third quarter update. Mr. Liberty.
I'm sorry, additions,
Oh,
deletions.
I'm sorry. Are there any additions, deletions?
Yeah, I don't know why we have the net metering discussion as a presentation. I think that should be either new business or, I mean, we don't have an unfinished business category here, but I don't see why it should be as a presentation because we're going to discuss it. We typically don't discuss policy matters in presentation section of the agenda. Can we reorder that?
If we're on conversation, sure, but we, on the last 2 or 3 agendas, we've had discussions put on by multiple commissioners here, so.
But not as a presentation. My
What
issue
are you
is
looking,
that it's
what are you looking for?
to
Is
move
there a
it to new
motion?
business. To move
Okay.
it to new business. It doesn't belong as a presentation because it's more than that.
Okay,
Second.
okay.
For discussion. It's for discussion.
Yeah, it's not it's not just a presentation.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Nays?
Nay.
Nay. It stays where it is.
That's not quite how.
Okay, Christie?
So we have to take another motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Madam Attorney?
Is there any discussion? Not, we can take a vote.
Okay. Ayes?
Aye.
Aye. Nay?
Nay.
Presentation for discussion purposes.
It's to
Just
move-
so I understand.
It's to move forward as presented.
For discussion.
Correct.
So that means we're not, this is for discussion, not for a vote.
Correct.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
We're
Motion.
not approving policy on net metering tonight
Correct.
Correct.
at all.
No,
Okay,
it's for discussion.
fine.
Motion carries
And,
3-1.
Correct.
Commissioner Robinson?
well, after discussion, is there an assurance that we're going to have it on our August 6th?
We haven't had that discussion yet.
All right, can we decide that?
We will decide based
Under
on
discussion.
what the recommendations are, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on, Mr. Liberty.
Good evening. Ed Liberty, the Electric Utility Director here at Lake Worth Beach, accompanied tonight by a whole group from our staff. Assisting me to my left, Walt Gill, our Assistant Director of Transmission and Distribution. So, and as questions come up or for various parts of discussion, I'll bring others up from the team. We also have some visitors tonight from Power Engineers, the engineering consulting company that's been helping us through the tie line discussion. So various points tonight, when we get into the tie line, I may defer to them or ask them to come up and answer some questions if we need to. Okay. Start out with our significant items. Let me get my versions that look as far. Significant activities, we're not going to go into all of these in any great detail. It's just to help identify the types of things that we've been working on. Obviously, based on last week's budget workshop, you know that we've been working on the 2020 budget and doing a lot of financial modeling. Our SHRIP work is underway. One of the things that we also spend a fair amount of time on to get right is to optimize our capacity nomination under the OUC contract. And that's going well. When we get into the financials, you'll see some of the results. The gas sale to PESCO, the gas capacity sale, is underway, and we've begun to see the expenses from that, and then the revenues are coming in this month. So we're started under that. The second tie line, the conceptual study, is completed, and you'll hear us talk about that a little bit later in the meeting. The TPTL1 transformer replacement was completed, and that transformer is now up and running and helping us meet the load. And it's also running well. Knock on wood. Phase 2 for solar, you all approved our request to step up from a 20 megawatt request to a 30 megawatt request. We have so informed FMPA, and they are in their discussions with the developer to get the power purchase contract in place. So that's still being negotiated. Pole attachment contract negotiations are continuing with the assistance of our outside counsel or city council, and that is going well, and the new revenues that we expected to be realized are beginning to show up in the financials as well. Warehouse inventory counting process is a work in progress. We continue to work our way through the inventory. This is the first year of our new process, so we're adapting to that and identifying issues as they come up rather than wait till the end of the year. In talking with FMPA about our communications needs, we did hold some discussions with their communications consultant who actually works with them on your annual report. It's a very, very impressive program, very impressive approach, which we like, and we'll be coming back to you in the next month or so to talk about that in more detail. And I think, as I mentioned, the budget workshop last week, you'll all be asked to participate in some workshops with that consultant, help us improve our communications with the community and our service territory as a whole. Our cost of service and rate study, we did do some work with FMPA on developing the scope of work. That scope of work is probably at about 95% complete, ready to go out for some pricing. And there has been some work that's already been done by FMPA in getting rate consultants on board for the FMPA utilities as a whole. So there is a group of entities that we can choose from and basically piggyback on the work that they've already done. We are working with Siemens on the closeout of their project, and we have some things to tidy up and some issues to resolve. So it's not officially closed out yet, although many items of the system are working well. There's some things that need some additional work. And we did spend a fair amount of time preparing for an arbitration with the IBEW with regards to a dispute that we have and how we utilize the workforce. They did grieve something that we were doing, and we just went through the arbitration last week. So we won't have the decision of the arbitrator probably for, I'm guessing, a few months. Significant issues, continued focus on decreasing discretionary spending, as you'll see in the financials in a few minutes. Power plant outages have been experienced at St. Lucie, which we're a part owner in, for 22 megawatts, and our own units here at Lake Worth Beach at our own power plant. Recruiting continues to be a significant issue. Solar net metering, as you might imagine, continues to be a significant issue. And pole attachment issues, specifically with AT&T, with regards to how we settle for amounts that we believe we were due for years past related to actual pole counts. So we're working with council on that. So pretty full plate. Significant events since we last met. Obviously, note TPTL1 transformer was replaced. We did submit and get approval by the Municipal Power Pool and OUC of our revised unit dispatch sheets for our power plant. and low natural gas prices. Natural gas prices drive our cost of supplemental energy that we buy under the OUC contract, and the gas prices are substantially lower than what we were modeled at, so our costs are coming in even lower than we thought. So that covers what I would call a significant items report. Next slide gets into the financials. If we take a look here, there's a lot of numbers to look at, and I'm not going to go through every single one, but I'll just point out some of the highlights. If you look to the right, the two columns under year-to-date variances to budget, those are probably the more important columns to look at. How are we doing relative to budget? We take all of the revenues that we expect from customers writing us checks or payments that we get from various entities and add those up, and we're running at about $422,000 ahead of what we had budgeted for those items. So our revenues are $422,000 higher. Some of the things that are of note there, we look all the way at the top on the residential sales. We can see the residential sales on a dollar sense is running 1.2% ahead of budget. If you look slightly to the left, you see it says variance to prior year. Interestingly, residential sales are up $969,000 over the prior year on a year-to-date basis. That's 4.6%. That's largely due, we believe, to weather, which has been significantly warmer, and you'll see that on a subsequent slide when we show you information on degree days. Commercial sales are down 3.9% relative to budget. However, on a year-over-year basis, commercial sales are actually up $39,000 year-to-date, which is really a fraction of a percent, but we're not necessarily losing commercial sales. They're just not growing at the rate that we had anticipated in the budget. So commercial sales are below budget in terms of growth. If we switch our attention to the bottom of the sheet under operating expenses, we take a look at things that we actually write checks for. Now, when we talk about operating again, and I always put out the disclaimer, these are non-GAAP numbers, right? These are not audited financials. This is our dashboard extracting stuff out of Naviline at the end of the quarter. The audited financials don't come till the end of the year and then some. Labor and salaries, we're down 1.7% below budget. 16% below budget on our purchase power costs. So $3.7 million below budget on purchase power costs. The gas transaction is actually showing higher expenses, but the reason for that is that in the first month that we start the deal, we're actually paying the capacity that we weren't paying before. The revenue associated with that sale will actually show up next month. So there's going to be a lag. We're paying the bill and then getting the revenues. Other O&M costs are below budget, but if you look at the total operating expenses, we're $3.5 million below budget on operating expenses and $422,000 ahead on operating revenues. So the net is a pretty good sign. So for those of you, I know all of you participated in the budget workshop, and you were able to see the modeling that was done by Stantec, and you can see how we're using our improved performance to climb out of that hole that we were in, and we're showing definitely positive cash flows. So we're rebuilding fund balances with this amount, and that will be used to fund our capital program going forward. This next slide gets into, it switches from, and a lot of these brackets from dollars to kWh, so, or the amount of energy that we deliver to our customers. So top right, you'll see that we've delivered 5.8% more energy to our residential customers than we have in the prior year. So our residential customers are using more energy, and commensurate with that, you see more revenues. Our commercial customers are actually 1.3% below the prior year, but very, very close in revenue. So this is where I like to just point out, well, does that math make sense then? Well, here's why it does make sense, is because the revenues that we recognize are effectively on a cash basis, meaning we're reflecting the revenues in the month that they came in. We reflect the cost in the month that we got billed for the cost. So we actually get the bill for the transmission and the electricity that we consume before we actually bill our customers for that level of energy. My 3 minutes are up? All right.
Pen.
Carry on.
I'll ask for a variance. So the good news is we're delivering more energy to our customers than the prior year. So in fact, we are growing. And a little bit later on, you'll see how our peak loads are actually growing as well. So we're moving more energy to our customers. If I go down to the bottom left-hand side, the bottom part, you'll see degree days. And if you look to the right, you'll see that our degree days are 254 higher than the prior year on a year-to-date basis. So degree days are up by 8.8%. So it goes to reason there that as degree days increase, meaning that it's hotter out, we're selling more energy, probably because more air conditioning is running and more fans. So we are selling more energy. We are, however, I like to tie this back to things that we've experienced recently. So in the budget workshop, you remember that we budgeted conservatively, though, for flat growth on our commercial market, which is effectively what we're seeing. And we budgeted 1% growth in the residential market, which is a little bit lower than what we're actually seeing. But what we don't want to do is budget next year assuming that we'll continue to get 3, 4, 5% growth. If that happens, great, but from a budget perspective, we're going to be conservative. We don't know if next year will continue to be even warmer than this year, or if it'll go back to the prior norm. So we budgeted very conservatively. In terms of meter data, at the bottom of the sheet, we get into some analysis on disconnects. Unfortunately, when that does take place. So in the prior year, at this point, we had 488. This year, the number's up to 518. The amount that we're owed at disconnect has gone from $167 up to $198. And the total amount that we're owed, if you take a look at all the customers that were disconnected, went from $81,000 on a year-to-date basis to $102,000, rather for the month, not for the year-to-date, but on a monthly basis. So the amount of customers that we have to disconnect is increased, and the amount that they owe us at the time of disconnect has increased as well. And jump to the next slide. Now this is a little bit hard to read, but especially for the folks in the audience, but I'll walk us through it. The two boxes at the top have to do with reliability, and this is where we do have some good news to tell. What we call SAIDI, CAIDI, and LBAR, and SAFI and MAFI. What are all those things? There are usually definitions attached in your package, but if they're not there, it's the system average interruption duration, the customer average interruption duration. LBAR is the amount of time that it takes to do the repairs, the system average frequency of interruptions, and the momentary interruptions. So what does all of that mean? If you look at the green, I'm colorblind, but I'm told it's green, the last little bar in those stacked bars, you'll see that the bar on the right is always lower than the bar on the left in this particular presentation. So we'll take our own little victory lap and say, hey, we're doing a better job on reliability than we did in the prior year. So the data is showing that our reliability is improving. Now, that's easy to say now. If you're a customer that experienced an outage, you're probably not thinking that. But the data does show that reliability for the system is improving. I'll point out that you note that you should see in 2018, the numbers spiked. You see the big bump up in 2018 in all the categories. That has to do with the fact that we were much harsher in the way that we graded ourselves. Prior to 2018, the time of the outage beginning and the time of the outage ending was based on conversation. It was based on when the customer actually called or when the crew reported that the customer was reconnected. Starting in 2018, we actually use data from the AMI system, from the meters, so we have it to the minute or to the second when the outage began and to the minute or second when the outage ended. So we're using much more factual and data-driven numbers as opposed to interpretations of when a phone call came in, which may have been sometime after when the lights went out or when the lights came back on. So we won't be making too many comparisons to what happened prior to 2018. We'll be using really 2018 as the baseline of clean data, sound data, good numbers in which to measure our performance and benchmark ourselves. When you see in the top hand corner on the right is really the underlying numbers behind the bars that you see there. One of the key items for us, too, in customer satisfaction is streetlights. We have probably 4,500 plus streetlights within the city bounds, another 1,500 plus, I believe, in the village of Palm Springs. They're all equally important to us. We do track the performance of the streetlight fleet. This year, we're running at 98.2% available versus the same period last year, which was 96.48, according to my data. I can't read it up there, but so we're improving in terms of fleet availability, and the number of lights that are out of service for repairs has decreased from the same time last year of 153 down to 83 this year. Repair time is a target that I created and said we need to have a target and how close we can get to it. We're running 4.5 days from the time that we learn of a street light outage until the time that it's repaired. And we do track that. And staff reports to me on this number about every 2 weeks or so at a staff meeting. Solar net metered customers, meter tamperings, things like that. You can see on there. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. We are going to talk about this in more detail. Solar energy purchases. You can see how much that is growing and what we're actually buying back from customers in excess of their production. This sheet we're definitely not going to go through, but the data that you saw on the prior sheets is extracted from this document here. And again, these are all numbers that come out of our financials. What I should do here, too, in all fairness, is give a shout out to our finance team. When we first started doing this about a year and a half ago, it was difficult to get reliable numbers on a timely basis. So I'll give the finance department a lot of credit. They give us these numbers very close to the beginning of the month. They're closing the books much quicker and giving us accurate information on a much more reliable basis. So I know that's something that we were complaining about initially, but I have to give them credit. They've really done a much better job to get these numbers to us so we can create our dashboards and manage the business better. So thank you to finance. I know they're not in the room, but they deserve the credit. That completes the third quarter financial report performance review.
Any questions? See any lights on? No questions. I have one. So going back to Siemens, we're still having some hiccups, so we're not going to close any of that out until we fix those hiccups.
Correct. The entire project has to be completed before we can accept the entire project. So we're working our way through some of the items that are not performing to our satisfaction, and recognizing that there are some things which are performing fine, but not everything is complete to our satisfaction.
And some of those lights that were out, is that some of the new Siemens lights that are out, or is it other?
No, the Siemens installed 4,500, roughly 4,500 LED lights within the city limits, and they're performing rather well. There were about, I'm going to say off the top of my head, about 150, 130 or so that were installation quality, poor quality of installation. Those were long ago repaired. That fleet of lights is operating rather well. The areas where we seem to have problems are on DOT lights, which we maintain, and on some of the lights from the village of Palm Springs, where we did not inherit an inventory of spare parts and we had to order special parts, or the DOT lights, which are not like our own LED lights. So it takes longer to get spare parts. And because of the location of some of those lights, you might have to get into traffic control situations. There may have been dig-ins by contractors that were outside the city limits, either in the county or in the village of Palm Springs. So the issue is a little bit more difficult when chasing down those. But by and large, the fleet that was installed here in the city is operating well.
Great, thank you. No more conversation. We'll move on to presentation B. Discussion on resolution 34, 2012, net metering. Who's taking the lead on that?
We'll get the right slides up here. I thought we were going to go into the tie line discussion, but you want to lead with
That's what I have. What, do you have additional on yours?
That's not on the agenda.
Tie line's not on here, but was it on your?
Tie line
No.
there's an item on consent for the tie line engineering, and we wanted to give some background on why we were proposing to do a tie line and what the project would look like. But the actual item is on the consent agenda.
Okay, that hasn't been moved, so we'll stick to B at the moment.
Okay. Net metering, just to refresh everybody on where we're at, we brought this issue forward a few months ago, and the direction was to take it to the Utility Advisory Board, the Electric Utility Advisory Board, to get their thoughts on what to do with regards to some of these issues. At the beginning of the Electric Utility Advisory Board meeting at that time, it was determined or announced that two of the individuals on that board had a potential conflict of interest that might affect their ability to participate in the meeting. That meeting of the advisory board was adjourned, and a referral was made to the Palm Beach County Commission on Ethics to get a determination on whether those two individuals did in fact have a conflict of interest. It was not the desire of the advisory board nor of staff to see those two individuals be put in harm's way from a conflict of interest point of view, one that they might not have been aware of. Subsequently, Palm Beach County Commission on Ethics did come back and said that based on their standard, which was a tougher standard than the state standard, that those two individuals did in fact have a conflict of interest by their definition, and that effectively meant that they should not speak on the matter. While we were waiting for that, this commission did approve a 4-month moratorium to allow us to put in place some rules, namely the interconnection rules, because we at that time did not have interconnection rules. We subsequently created an interconnection agreement, and that was subsequently approved by this board. After that, and with the opinion of the Palm Beach County Commission on Ethics, we did convene a meeting of the Utility Advisory Board. However, at that meeting, the advisory board was unable to attain a quorum. The meeting, however, did go forward, is my understanding, technically as a workshop, where we held a discussion with the advisory board members present who were in fact allowed to speak on the matter. There were at least one other member who was present but not able to speak on the matter and did not. And we did have a good, healthy discussion with those two members that were able to speak, as well as with members of the public who were given the opportunity to render their opinion. There are a lot of different issues to be resolved, and frankly, we're looking for some direction from the commission on what direction you would like to see us go in so we can prepare something that could come forward for a vote. Now, I do understand that one or more of the advisory board members who were at the meeting are here tonight and may want to speak. My suggestion, obviously you control who speaks, my suggestion would be to hear them out and let them speak and offer their opinions as members of the board, of the advisory board.
Mr. Hardy?
So typically we don't have public comment in presentation,
We do not.
which is part of the problem that I have with this being as a presentation. There are people who are in the audience tonight who are affected by the process that we've started on, and they will not have an opportunity to speak this evening. That's number one. Number two, why is it that after we've met about this issue previously on this dais, and after the Utility Advisory Board has met about this issue, I understand that they did not have a quorum. Part of that had to do with the way that we treated the board. I think we should take responsibility for the fact that they didn't have a quorum, and I don't think that responsibility lies on the members because we really jerked them around. So we've had meetings about this. They've had a meeting about this. Why is it that we're unable to take action tonight on this matter when we've known that this item was going to come up on July 30th for some time? And I'm wondering if I can get an answer from the city manager about this, because I don't feel this is an orderly meeting. And in addition to that, again, the people in the back here who are affected by this are unable to talk about it.
Okay, first of all, let me weigh in. In the mayor's absence, I have not made a decision whether they can speak or not. Right after, there is public participation, but I wanted to hear staff, and then I will let everyone speak, because the majority of people that are here to speak on that meeting. So I have no problem with allowing them to speak on this issue. And I'm pretty sure that the reason the UAB board members could not speak at that meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, was because we were covering them to make sure that they did not speak outside the sun. I'm not going to argue the fact. I'm making a statement based on what you said, and now
An untrue statement.
it was a finding by the IG.
There were members who weren't
I'm not going to
there,
argue.
who weren't conflicted.
City manager.
Mr. Vice Mayor, the fact of the matter is, as we've tried to progress to get some resolution on how to proceed with policy for you to consider, we've had some fits and starts, which Mr. Liberty went through, and we thought it was most prudent to have and take the time to have a presentation and discussion, given the fact that we didn't have a quorum at the meeting, there was a lot of opinions expressed, and there's been a lot of information we want to go through, that it wasn't appropriate to bring forward the resolution for vote at this time. I can appreciate, Commissioner Hardy, your concern about having a discussion item under presentation. Sometimes the commission has allowed people to speak on that, but we didn't feel comfortable bringing the resolution back at this point. So
How are we going to discuss the resolution we don't even have in front of us? The only backup we have is a single sheet of paper when the discussion item is a resolution.
the fact of the matter is, the items that you'll be hearing about and having some discussion about will find their way into a resolution format. If we had brought a resolution forward right now, we weren't completely sure of the positions you guys wanted to take on the various components. So this is, and we only meet once a month as a utility board of directors.
We don't
So-
even have the old resolution in front of us to compare.
Sure, it's in the backup.
There's no
I
backup
would-
because there's no item to this.
Vice Mayor, I'd allow the utility director to continue with this presentation, and I think that might start to get some
Absolutely. And if you have your
Direction
book,
formulated, please.
the old resolution is in the
No,
book.
that's, I believe that's with the
Thank you.
utility, that's with the
Deposit.
utility deposit
Deposits, okay.
resolution.
There's no
It's
backup.
not this, there is no backup with this.
Okay. Carry on.
So, to correct some misperceptions, this book was in fact provided to every member of the UAB prior to that first meeting.
That's where I saw the backup. Okay,
and
thank you.
and was extensive. It was at that meeting that the UAB declined to discuss what was in the book, but rather adjourned the meeting immediately upon realizing that two other individuals might have a conflict. So that was put in abeyance. When we subsequently met, it turned out that there was no quorum, and at least one of the three individuals who did appear for the meeting was in a conflict and acknowledged it, and there was no issue. So we could not even say that there was a consensus of the UAB.
Right.
So frankly, I expect that I would have been taken to task if I brought forward a resolution tonight that was not even backed up by a consensus or a vote of the UAB. So
Commissioner Hardy.
we're presenting really issues that need to be discussed to see if there's some specific direction, because there's many, many, many different ways to go with these issues. And for staff to put a straw man out there that may not be representative of what you would like to see done would probably be a big time burner as well. So the desire tonight was merely, and it says, guide for discussion and policy direction. There's no resolution being brought forward tonight. This is a conversation, and I do believe that one or more of the UAB members may be here tonight to speak individually, because they could not take a vote, therefore they could not speak about a consensus.
I appreciate being recognized by the chair. Again, the issue that I have is we didn't have a quorum, in part because there are two members who resigned because of the way that they were treated, okay, by this body and as they felt by staff. And in addition to that, there were some members who were conflicted, okay? Now, we got that booklet. How long ago, Ed?
When we first started conversation.
And how long ago was that? Several
3
months ago.
We're
Okay.
in,
Okay.
The third month
Now-
of our moratorium,
Okay. So
going into our formal.
someone who wanted to, like a member of the public who wanted to come here, learn about this issue, would get one page. They wouldn't get the original resolution that we're thinking about rejiggering. Okay. And this is not this, and I'm glad that you're willing to allow, Mr. Chair, on this meeting, people to talk. Nobody knows that before they come here. And it shouldn't be a matter of what the chair feels again, right?
I didn't write that, and
We had the opportunity to move it to allow automatic public comment.
but we, with all fairness, we are here tonight. Let's talk about the issues, have those conversations. We're going to bring it back to a regular meeting where people will be able to speak again and it will be clearly in the backup. So, Mr. Liberty, will you carry on?
Yes, and just
Can you turn your light
for the record, there are no new documents being introduced tonight. Everything we're referring to has been produced at already 2 UAB meetings at which the public could have asked for these information, and I think there may have been some requests and they were provided. So, items that need to be given some thought to, and we'd like to get some direction. And again, one or two of the UAB members may be here tonight to give their thoughts on these. Are on the board. Tier systems. The Lake Worth system currently caps us to a single tier of 10 kW in terms of the maximum size of a system that can produce no more than the customer's annual energy needs. And that was spelled out in a resolution in 2012, Resolution 34-2012. We also have a cap on total installed capacity that was put in place for a technical reason, but also a value reason. So we need to get some direction on whether you want the tier systems to continue, what discussion you want to have around that, what direction you want to give, and what do you want to do with regards to a cap. The cap is in part technically driven. The biggest issue probably is what do we want to pay for production in excess of a customer's needs. So there are systems that have been installed in the city of Lake Worth and in the surrounding service territory, which could be in the village of Palm Springs or the county, which are connected to our utility, which produce more power than the customer needs or uses. And that power is exported into our utility system. So the question is, what amount should customers be paid for electricity they produce in excess of what they need? Positions on that vary from the concept of avoided cost, which is what many utilities do, all the way up to exactly the retail rate. Various arguments back and forth, pro and con. The concept of avoided cost, paying avoided cost means paying the customer the avoided energy rate, meaning what we would have paid for the energy had they not sold us their excess. And I say sold us because they didn't really sell it to us, they just pushed it to us. It comes to us automatically. There's literally no way to stop it. So that power comes to us, and we currently pay the full retail rate, even though what we could have bought the power for was substantially less. At the other end of the equation, obviously, if you're one of the people that has these systems, you want to get paid as much as possible. We currently pay them the full retail rate. So whether it's a commercial customer or a residential customer, they get paid for the power they produce at a rate equal to what they would have been charged for that power. The issue there is when we buy power at wholesale and resell it at retail, we mark it up, as any business would. What do we do with that markup? That markup is what we use to pay for the debt service, the salaries, the O&M, the materials, the trucks, the fuel, the wires, the transformers, the poles. That's what we use to operate and maintain the system. So we're crediting the customer back at a fully loaded retail rate when all we've really avoided is the discounted wholesale rate and a component of that. Order of magnitude numbers, our avoided energy rate is around 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Now that doesn't include capacity charges, transmission charges, delivery charges, things like that, built-in costs. And they're basically selling it back to us at 9.8 to 11 to 12 cents a kilowatt hour, depending on the size of the customer. So the difference is substantial. That's a policy decision, what you choose to pay or not pay for that energy. Our job is to bring that forward to you and get some direction from you on how you want to do it. Applicability of minimum billing. There are customers who produce more power than they need, or customers who produce almost exactly what they need. Therefore, their net bill with the utility is very low or near zero. And the question here is those customers are in fact using the system. They're putting energy into the system and taking energy out of the system. It just happens to net to zero or very close to zero, so they don't get a bill. I think the analogy to that is getting an Uber ride to and from the airport and telling the driver, well, you took me there and you brought me back, the net is zero, I don't owe you anything. But you in fact did use the car to go back and forth. Now, what's fair, what's not fair? We currently, by resolution from 2012, do not charge a minimum charge. We need some guidance on whether you would like that to remain as is, or do you think there should be a minimum bill associated with it? Monthly versus annual balancing or cash out. What does that mean? Customers who are in the territory today who have installed solar and are participating in the net metering program are currently cashed out monthly, meaning that at the end of each month in our billing system, we look at how much energy they produced and how much energy they consumed, and if they delivered more energy to the system than they consumed, we give them a credit equal to whatever their electric bill would have been for that amount. They then apply that credit to their entire city utility bill, whether it's water, electric, or sewer. It comes right off the utility bill. Some utilities, not every single utility, but many utilities look at this on an annual basis and they cash out annually. That may make a difference to some customers whether we look at this monthly or annually. It's done both ways, but at Lake Worth it's done on a monthly basis. It's my understanding that if we choose to do it on an annual basis, there may be some system changes that need to happen within the billing system. I have to admit that I'm not an expert on that because this particular item wasn't brought forward to the UAB meeting recently. So that's something we would need to take a look at if you chose to go to annual versus monthly. If we stay with monthly, we're already doing it. If you want to go to annual, we would research that and give you some thoughts on what that might take. Now, all of the bullets at the top, except for grandfathering, have to do, you could say, well, those all apply to new customers, for sure, but they might apply to existing customers. So part of the question is, what do we do about the 80 customers who installed their systems, who might be subject or not be subject to new rules going forward? So what grandfathering, if any, should be applied to existing customers? You may choose to grandfather them, and then if you do choose to grandfather them, under each one of these items above, for how long? Forever? For as long as they own that particular home or establishment, or for some fixed period of time? So there are many things to discuss here which are very important to many of the people sitting in the room behind me today. I would venture to say probably more than 50% of them. And we need some guidance on how you want to set that. I also point out that there's probably 26,000 plus customers who are not sitting here tonight who have an interest in what we allow here or not allow here. So we need some direction. And I'll add that I recognize that there's no vote being called, but from the discussion, even though there may not be a vote, we can then craft a resolution which would address multiple items and bring that forward at the next meeting.
Okay. I'm going to think outside the box for a moment. I know a lot of people here want to speak. You need to put a blue card in if you want to speak on net metering. I currently only have 2 blue cards on net metering. There may be some in non-agended items that you might want to move, but I'm actually going to let people speak first. Sometimes we tend to get a little winded up here, so I want to make sure that we hear from you first. So if you have not turned a card in and you want to speak, please do that now. I'll give you a few moments to do that before we start conversation up here.
So you want to do net metering? Yeah. Are these net metering?
This agenda is a mess.
Oh, okay, yes, please turn a card in so we have it for public. But please remember, UAB board members, if you were not voted from the UAB board to speak on their behalf, you have to put it in your record that you're not speaking on behalf of the UAB board. You can note that you are a board member, but the only time you can speak on behalf of your board is if you have been sent here to speak on their behalf. Okay, Richard Douglas. You're up first. Thank you. Please give us your name and address for the record. No, we need a microphone, please. Hold on one second. Hold on. We need a microphone for the record.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay, I'm Richard Douglas. I'm with my wife, Mary Ann. We reside at 605 South Palmway. We got hooked up approximately 1 year ago, and we're loving it. It was the right thing to do. We have a system that's 6.9 kilowatts. We have 22 panels on our roof. Cost approximately $16,000. That's for a 1,500 square foot. We were previously snowbirds, so we didn't know how to estimate our usage. We weren't here in the summertime when we knew it would be high. So we've, I think, drastically underestimated the amount of power that we use because we're now paying electric bills. Okay, the system, in other words, is not large enough. According to my reading of the agreements that I've received in the mail, we will not be able to expand that. Okay, aside from the fact that the world does not stand still, and according to Ed's presentation, the city received $1 million, approximately $1 million more this year than last year because of basically temperature rise. And I think anybody with a brain, anybody with a scientific bent understands that that will impact the future. And when the 10 kilowatt limit was put in what, 2007, I don't think Tesla had even put a car on the road at that point. So I'm here to tell you that the proposed agreement says we cannot expand our system, and I'm planning on expanding the system. The 3-page application, the 6-page agreement, the 11-page rules and regulations, all single-spaced, in my mind, were a restricting, obstructionist, regressive, burdensome, and folks, I think unlawful. I'm not a lawyer, but I know where to get them. Okay, I will not be signing an agreement, a document that I consider not lawful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are timing it, so unfortunately, I will have to call it when you go over your time.
What time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes,
Okay.
same as always. Janet Serrano, followed by Peggy Fisher. I'm sorry?
She just wants to.
Oh, okay. Peggy Fisher, followed by Paul Abbott.
Peggy Fisher. Peggy Fisher, 508 North A Street. No longer a member of UAB. I would suggest that if you want to get feedback from the commission, maybe each one of the commissioners should have been given this worksheet, which was in the book that was given to the UAB in April, which covers all those categories, ask all your opinion. Great way to get your feedback. Each one of you fills out one, they got your feedback. They feed that into the resolution. Rather than sit here, and we're timing too, because presentation that goes over 30 minutes with you all talking, workshop, you've got to treat the people in this city fairly and listen to them and not ram stuff down their throats, because that's not what they want. They're trying to do what's been talked about repeatedly in this city. Green energy, making it better for now and for the future. And we should be welcoming that. If the city put a resolution in 2012 and did not enforce it, that's not any of the residents' fault. That's on the city. If there's one in 2013 that wasn't enforced, that's on the city. It's not on the people. And that's what's getting lost in this. That's the communication that seems to be getting lost, is you put rules in place, then 6, 7 years later, you want to go back to them and say, oh, we forgot this. Mm-hmm. That's not true. There are things that were in place in 2012 that are required by state law that have been done every year by the utility board. Not the utility advisory board, but the utility agent division. And, you know, to say, oh, we didn't know. You did know. Somebody knew, or you aren't doing your job.
Thank you. Paul Abbott,
Hi, I'm Paul Abbott. I live at 136 Harvard Drive. It's a fact, climate change is happening. It's undeniable and unavoidable. It's constantly in my face. It's in the news, social media, everywhere I look. Now I'm a father, and I feel even more responsible to do my part, however big or small. My wife and I purchased a house in College Park 2 years ago. It was built in the 50s with a few updates. So we replaced the 20-year-old AC unit. We replaced the lights with LED bulbs. We're improving insulation. We bought an electric car. So the next obvious thing is to go solar. After all, we have an abundance of energy beaming down on us. So we did our research. I'm an electrical engineer, so this comes naturally to me. I tallied up all our energy loads in our household, and in working with the solar installer, we decided on an 8 kilowatt PV array on our roof. We signed a contract on March 22nd. Then 6 weeks later, we're informed that Lake Worth Beach has placed a moratorium on new solar installations. How can this be happening? It's my impression, or it was my impression, that Lake Worth Beach is a progressive city. The city's website used to have a section about a green initiative that we can no longer find. And at the last commission meeting, the mayor announced Lake Worth Beach had been awarded honorable mention for the Mayor's Climate Protection Award. So what's the reason for this moratorium? The city claims it's a paperwork issue, but the real reason is the city is afraid they'll lose revenue because my household will be buying less energy from the municipal utility. This smells like a conflict of interest. It's not the members of the utility advisory board who personally have a solar installed on their roof who have a conflict. It is this arrangement where the city government is in bed with the municipal utility that's a conflict.
Yeah. Emily Abbott. Take your time.
Hi, my name's Emily Abbott. I also live at 136 Harvard Drive in College Park. So to piggyback off what my husband said, it's a conflict of interest because the city is focused on the revenue that is generated by the municipal utility. And you, are going to make a decision that will affect our residents' future, only keeping the bottom dollar in mind. Anytime you work with a budget that has variable revenues, you have to adapt to change to keep the budget balanced. There are plenty of other revenue-generating mechanisms the city can consider when balancing the budget. For example, property taxes. We bought our home from a resident who had homesteaded since 1997. Our property taxes tripled when our house was reassessed. The parking at the casino building was recently increased to generate more city revenue. And why not encourage more residents to go solar? The city could partner with some installers to create an enticing offer that all parties could benefit from. There are plenty of options other than penalizing residents for being conscientious citizens who want to make a positive impact on our planet's future. And city government is a public service, not a business. We're not after a free lunch here. We're investing $20,000 in clean energy, and we may not see a return on our financial investment for 15, 16, 20 years. That is, if sea levels haven't risen enough to swallow our house because of climate change. At the beginning of our journey, we joined a solar co-op to educate ourselves about the choices ahead of us, not knowing that fighting with our city would be one of those issues. We've shared the Interconnection Agreement with the co-op's lawyer, and he's informed us specifically that provisions 4C and 6C are unusual and may not hold up legally under Florida state solar laws. In summary, we're trying to do the right thing, but there are financially motivated barriers preventing us from moving forward with our plan. We've signed an agreement with our solar installer, and we have a questionable contract from our city that we have to sign before we can even get a permit to install our panels. We'd like you to figure out the agreement's terms and remove this moratorium barrier so we can put panels up and generate clean power.
Thank you.
So when you vote, will you vote for our children's future, or will you be on the wrong side of history and let your judgment be corrupted by a short-sighted, unsustainable money-making scheme? Thank you.
Justin Hoystrat. Did I pronounce that right? Justin. Followed by Tammy Panza.
Good afternoon, good evening. Good to see a lot of people from the public here. My name is Justin Hoysrad. I live in the city of West Palm Beach, and I am here today again representing the Florida solar industry. I just want to commend the commission on one thing, which is continuing the Electric Utility Advisory Board. Last week's workshop, although limited in scope and membership, was a great workshop. We were able to have qualified discussions about the future of net metering, how net metering works, and provide informed conversation to membership. And it was great, public-spirited conversation. From that meeting, we did see a lot of these topics come up, and hopefully tonight we will get a recommendation out of the members from the EUAB and maybe even Mr. Liberty as well to direct the commission in a fashion that will extend the city's net metering program. I do have thoughts on a certain agenda item that occurred previously, which was the resolution in June, which subsequently added a 1.5% capacity cap to the city's participation of net metering, which is now currently in the interconnection agreement that's approved. I don't recall anyone from this dais specifically asking for a cap to the number of participants allowed once the interconnection agreement was approved and net metering restored. So I'd like the commission to consider that during the process and when they hear from maybe other members of the EUAB. I do support the effective copy of tiered programs from our friends in Juno Beach up in Lake Worth, or I'm sorry, FPL. I think that would be a fantastic addition to this city's net metering program. It is pretty interesting to hear from our friend Mr. Liberty that the city has increased the capacity of which they are selling electricity by 1.2%, yet the net metering program is somehow bankrupting the utility. It's just a little bit fishy in that scenario. In addition, $102,000 a month in unpaid utility bills, yet year to date, $200,000 in net metering.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Tammy Panza, 116 North L. I am not a customer of the solar utility, but I would like to be someday. Basic questions I'd like to see answered. Currently, we have a minimum billing for regular electric users. I think a minimal nominal fee for solar users to hopefully assuage the fears of the utility department that we won't be spending money on people who aren't returning. I'd also like to see anything above the customer's needs have the ability to be purchased back by the city at a wholesale rate to be no more than what we pay for electric ourselves. In that way, we're not going to bankrupt anybody. I would also like to see the ability of having more solar installations in our city solar array, and the possibility of batteries or some other option where we can generate more power cleanly rather than purchasing power. It's a no-brainer. I think there's a lot of the city, I think, is taking advantage of the current legal situation with not having a lot of backup available. The EUAB meetings, I was laughing when Commissioner Hardy was holding up this single one-page, really huge font and then suggesting that we know that we're supposed to go back 2 months or 3 months and look into maybe a YouTube video because there's no archives backup or anything online. I know a lot about the city, and it's like pulling teeth to getting any information out. Any one of the people that's not sitting here, just the average Joe who wants to know anything, you're not going to find it. The last time I went online to look on an agenda for even just a commission meeting, there wasn't even an agenda posted. I looked at the agenda posted here. I got the agenda with the backup sent to me for this meeting. It's still not as complete as I would want it to be. So I'm going to ask you guys to please step up and make sure the public gets the information it needs. And if you guys don't have it for your budget meetings, FAB, EUAB, all of those things, then someone here is not doing their job and they need to be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is John, but I can't read the last name, 705 North Lakeside.
Sorry, my scroll is a little rough.
Mine's just as bad. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to, throw a voice of reason in here. You guys have seen me a couple of times, asking to be grandfathered in.
Step a little closer to the microphone.
You guys have seen me a couple of times before asking to be grandfathered in because I got caught right on the cusp of the moratorium. But now I just want to speak for reason that, when you guys do consider what you're going to vote on. I understand anybody that does have solar, we're going to need to pay for the infrastructure a little bit too. So I think a reasonable minimum is something that's going to be acceptable. Just don't get onerous on it. Don't, kill us with it. So, do something that is maybe a net even for the city and the users, not something that's going to make a profit necessarily, but consider something that's going to be, fair to all, but yet still encourage solar, because solar is, using power, and it's generating power during peak demand in general. Everybody's running the ACs, and that's really when I think it's going to benefit everybody the most, generating power that is as clean as we can get at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ramsey Stevens.
Good evening, Commissioners. So I am speaking as the one representative of the EUAB here this evening, and as one of the only two who were able to participate in our workshop. Chairwoman Maxwell and I, in short, did reach consensus that at a minimum, our program should be the equivalent of Florida Power and Light's. If we're going to be at parity with Florida Power and Light in terms of rates, that same principle should apply for solar customers too. And that's a very simple solution that you could adopt without too much brain damage. That being said, we can and we must do better. As you all saw last week, the utility is frankly in a somewhat dire situation if you look at our budget going out 5-10 years. And putting our head in the sand and pretending that distributed generation is not going to become ever more of an economic issue is just not the way to solve this. You can flip the script a little bit, and you can actually embrace this opportunity this evening to right-side the economics of the utility, solve the minimum bill issue, and then pay the most generous amount possible for solar on top of that. And you never have to worry again about whether or not the Lake Worth utility will be here, right? You can also then start to embrace more advanced programs like demand response, community solar. There's a lot of things we can be doing that would be profitable for the utility, our neighbors, that is our ratepayers, and the city, right? But to do those things, it starts with looking at this problem a little differently than it's been presented to date, solve the minimum bill issue, and then go all in on net metering. So with that, I'm happy to answer any more questions about specifically our meeting. Let me note one last thing. Grandfathering. Chairwoman Maxwell and I were also in, pretty clear consensus that just do no harm. You cannot be too conservative or generous, I don't know how you want to look at it, as it relates to grandfathered customers. Just don't hurt the people who've put real money into their system so far.
Thank you. Brock Grill, followed by Ricardo Rojas.
Hello, Commissioners. Good night or good evening. My name is Brock Grill. My address is 174 Vassar Drive. I'm a member of the Planning and Zoning Board for the City of Lake Worth Beach. I'm here on behalf of my wife Michelle, my daughter Kiara, who will be 2 on August 4th. I have a 4.7 kilowatt system. I'm a professor at the Scripps Research Institute, and I enjoy living in the city of Lake Worth. It's a great city. There's a lot of things to like about it, but this is not one of them. The idea of a 1.5% capacity cap is really ridiculous. It's not progressive. It's foolish. I agree with much of what's been said tonight. The utility clearly is a source of revenue for the city. That puts the commissioners with a bit of a conflict. And that's not a comfortable place to be. I understand that. But going forward, let's be progressive. Let's do something good for our neighbors like Emily and Paul. Let's support people who want to make an investment in a good piece of technology, in a better form of energy. The city should not be discouraging this with onerous policy. And right now, there's a lot of confusion. I attended the utility board meeting last week. I appreciate what Justin said. I found it to be a bit onerous. It was lengthy. There was a lot going on. It was not that helpful for the public in some ways. I also went and spoke with Joel Rutsky last week and got some more information about the utility. And I've learned a lot about how this works. But at the end of the day, it's still the same problem. 10 kilowatts is a tiny system. It is not a very large system. There is language in the contract that I now had to sign It says that we can only install 90% of our capacity. That's what's in the language that I signed. 90% of our utility bill. That's an incredibly hard number to hit. Installers can't hit numbers like that. You do the best you can. So, I mean, I think we need to be reasonable. Tiers are a good idea. There's nothing wrong with a small minimum, but I can see the city going way in on overreach and making the minimum prohibitive to new installations. So let's do the right thing. Let's do something good and exciting for the city. Let's make a good choice. Let's not just bog everything down in process and long meetings and then make a bad decision.
Thank you. Ricardo?
Ricardo Rojas, and I live in 826 Snowden. I have a system, 8 kilowatts. Had it for a year. It's great. Makes me feel fantastic knowing that not only am I going to have a low bill, but I'm doing the right thing.
You said 8.2?
8.8, just an 8.6. So the big thing here is the moral argument. Why is the city so concerned about capping what other people are going to do with the system? And I understand there's a problem about cost and maintaining the lines and doing all of that. But let's be hopeful that maybe in 5-10 years, the city is going to have a problem because everybody's got solar panels on the roof. And then we'll address that problem. But today, it's not a problem. We have 80 customers. Why are we changing something that is not broken? And yeah, percentage-wise, in the presentation that it was presented, it looks huge. It's a great thing. You know, we live in the Sunshine State. We should be the city. We were the first city in the state that has a solar plant installed. And we should be so proud of that. And right now, what you're doing is hindering, saying to me and to anyone that lives in the city, we're not for that. And it just feels wrong. And I'm so proud of living here, and I've done everything that I can to affect what I could control when it comes to the environment. And you guys are just capping everyone else that's going to come behind me. I got this agreement sent home, and it was scary. And it's like, why is there's no problem. So what you're doing is right now is telling everyone stop being green, and because it doesn't make sense financially. We spend a lot of money. We spend, some of us, over $10,000. Most people in the city don't have that kind of money to spend. And right now, what you're telling everyone, stop doing that.
Thank you. Karen McKinley. That's the last card I have. If anybody's turned another one in, I do not have it.
Hello, I live at 12 Harvard Drive. Russell Hibbert is my husband. We've lived in Lake Worth for 30 years now. We've had solar 10 years. We were the third house to do it. We have an 11.5 kilowatt system. I just want to ask you guys, how naive are you? It's getting hotter. Solar makes sense. You haven't discussed or planned. We need long-range planning here, you know? We don't react to short-term budget concerns. You know, Lake Worth has always had the utility pay a lot of their bills. Now you need to think bigger picture. All of us are going to do this eventually.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardy?
Again, I'll echo what Ms. Panza said. We got, by the way, I got this sheet at 6 p.m. today. Okay. It was on this dais when I arrived. This was the extent of the backup that I had on this issue. Now, if I were to make a connection and go back to the fact that several months ago, I received a binder with information about net metering in it, that's fine. But it's not acceptable for people on this dais and for people in the community to be given backup about an important issue that people care greatly about on the day of, and that the backup is essentially this. And in this backup, it refers to a resolution that we don't even have here on this dais, right? We don't even have it on this dais, let alone the people. That's not acceptable. This agenda was not put together in an appropriate way. That's the way that I feel. We can discuss that in our one-on-ones, but that needs to be said. Number one. Number two, can we go back to this presentation here? There's a very insightful chart to the first presentation that you gave. Can we put that up on the screen? So I'm looking at page 4 of that presentation. Bingo. Can we zoom in on that pie graph? Is that pie chart rather? Is that possible? Because if we can't, okay, so what we're concerned about and what we're promulgating all this policy about is that sliver that I can barely see. Okay? You have 3 sections on this chart. You have the big orange part, you have the smaller blue part, and then you have a sliver that's like microscopic. It's barely visible. Okay, and rounded out, it's actually 0, rounded out on the graph. I can see here because I have it. That's what we're so afraid of, that we feel the need to limit the rights of people who want to do a good thing in their community. And really, I mean, this is a regional global issue, climate change, and people are trying to do their part. And here we are promulgating policies that restrict people's, and I'm going to say property rights, because of what is basically like not even a rounding error in our customer count here. That I have a problem with. When we were approached to talk about the moratorium, I had a problem with that. When we were approached about this moratorium, and when we were told about the rationale for the moratorium, we were told that this was about getting people to sign an interconnection agreement. Well, first of all, coming up with a standard interconnection agreement for the city and then getting people to sign it. We came up with an interconnection agreement. How long ago was that? Mr. City Manager, was it over a month ago?
I don't recall.
Okay, yeah. So we've long had an interconnection agreement, yet we still have a moratorium. I'm just going to go down the list of these things here, starting with tiered system. I'm okay with that. The larger property you have, the larger your system capacity should be allowed to be. A cap on total installed capacity, I'm not okay with that at all. I'm certainly not okay with a 1.5% cap on total installed capacity. We should be encouraging people to get solar here in the city, not limiting the amount of people who can have it. Payments for production in excess of a customer's needs. I think the viability of that depends on whether or not you have a minimum billing system or like basically, like a rate or a fixed amount that everybody has to pay, whether you have solar or not. I think if you right size that minimum billing, it makes it, it makes the utility more capable to be able to pay people for production in excess of a customer's need, and it makes the utility more capable of paying them a rate that's generous. And I'm okay actually with doing something like this. If you are homesteaded, for example, we should pay you perhaps a more generous rate than people who are not homesteaded, because we know that if you're homesteaded, then it's basically essentially economic development here in the city, right? Where we're basically keeping money in the pockets of our residents and not in the pockets of the city, and that does good here. We talk about business. I got a phone call from a reporter today talking about the not today, but yesterday, talking about the bookseller, right? I want residents in this city to have as much money in their pockets as possible, and if we have minimum billing, we can pay them generously for the solar that they generate. Monthly versus annual balancing cash out, I'm okay with an annual balancing cash out. And grandfathering, I agree with the do no harm principle, right? I do not see why or how someone could have installed solar on their property, and then several years later, because it's no longer working for us, we change the terms of the deal and use our corrosive power as a government to get them to buy onto these terms that they didn't accept to begin with. That's an issue. If there were items in the resolution that we weren't enforcing, that's our fault, not theirs. There's a principle of fair warning here, and these people were not fairly warned. That's just yeah, this is like a really, really frustrating conversation because of all the conversations we could be having about the electric utility that could, rightly be controversial. This should not be one of them. This was a solution in search of a problem, as is another item on this agenda this evening. And it's just unfortunate that we even have to go through this. And by the way, we're supposed what we're doing this evening is promulgating public policy, but we're doing so in a weird section on the agenda. and we're doing so without a vote, right? And the wonderful thing about votes is that they're binary, they're yes or no. And at the end of the day, residents can tell how commissioners feel about a given issue just by looking at the issue and then looking at the vote, right? But residents will be robbed of that, right? Residents will be robbed of that. We've essentially muddied their ability to discern or determine what our opinions are. And shame on us for allowing that to happen. And again, that goes back to the way that this agenda was put together.
Mr. Robinson?
I'm,
Excuse me one second, Ed, or whoever, can you put back up the 5 or 6 items, please?
so I'm appreciative of allowing us to, it's taken, it started out at 6 months. I thought 30 days would be enough time to deliberate this. I don't like the assumption that we're anti-solar. I'm very much for it. It's sort of like, we're family. We had a member of the family that was kicking into the kitty, and now that family member has gotten a little bug of some sort and isn't going to be producing to the kitty as much as we had hoped for. So I understand that happens. I just think that this is the future. We are a progressive town. We must embrace solar as much as we can. And we're going to have a vote on, I understand that we're going to have a vote on a resolution on the 6th. I would hope that that resolution can be produced by the Wednesday before the 6th instead of Friday night before the 6th, so that we can at least be able to converse about it. I question when we were negotiating purchasing power, was that a unilateral decision to put a cap on us producing 1.5%? How did that happen?
There is no such cap on us producing in the contract with OUC. That's correct. I know the contract. There's no 1.5% limit in the contract.
Okay, quiet.
Well,
we don't go back and forth.
I know there's a lot of experts, but it's not in the OUC contract. There's no limitation to how much solar we could produce. That has nothing to do with the OUC contract.
Thank you, because I didn't like to hear that. And
Interconnection agreement.
I'm sorry?
The interconnection agreement.
Well,
the 1.5%.
Hold on. We don't talk back and forth from.
I think the audience is referring to a different contract.
Hold on.
The city has a contract for supplemental power with Orlando Utilities Commission to supply our supplemental power above and beyond what we receive from assets that we have an interest in, such as St. Lucie and the Stanton project. The supplemental power contract was purposely worded by staff to not prevent us from adding more solar, either under contract or residential. So there are no prohibitions in our contract with Orlando Utilities Commission for increasing the amount of solar we buy.
Is there anything in the contract that you're asking the 80-plus residents to sign?
There is a clause in there which limits the total installed capacity of solar in our system. The allegation was made that this was OUC. Not the case. And it's limited to 1.5%. And it's not driven by greed, contrary to what people behind me would have you believe with the solar industry. There's a technical reason for that. Our own system, 1.7 megawatt system, is so large that during certain periods of operation,
We know where it is.
I know what's in it. I did it for public record. Thank you.
it's in there. We're talking about different contracts. Our own solar system that the city owns, 1.7 megawatt system, is so large relative to the capability of our system to absorb that power that there are times during which we take it offline because it creates such instability in our electric system. That's the reason 1.5% was created. Not greed or avarice or ignorance or deception. That's why that was there. There's a technical reason for that. That's why it's in there. When our system is operating in an island operation, and certainly during what we call black start operations, that system is disabled because it can swing the power quality to the extent that it jeopardizes our ability to keep those circuits in service and could cause them to trip offline. So as a preventative measure, our own system is taken offline. So what we asked for was a 1.5% cap on adding new customers, not in numbers of new customers, but total KW of installed capacity. There's a technical reason for do that, especially while we're on a single tie line, which puts us at great risk.
And
That's why that was done.
And the technology of the future isn't going to allow us to we dialed down our own solar system for that technical reason you just talked about. Is there no technology that's coming that we will automatically be able to kick in to stop this surge that from a
There are a number of ways that we could do that, none of which are really palatable to us. The last thing I want to do is to have to decide which customer's system am I going to reach into, even if I had the technical ability to do it.
all of them.
That would be extremely difficult to do, to be able to reach into their systems and disable them. So what we said was, based on the condition of our distribution system on a single tie line and the island nature of our system, for now, to have a 1.5% cap. If in the future we have a second tie line, we upgrade the distribution system and we can absorb these swings, we would certainly remove that cap. But it was there for a technical reason. It was not an economic decision. It was a technical reason.
So when we get the second tie line, which I'm
talking about.
we're talking about, when will we revisit the 1.5% cap?
That can be revisited on a rolling basis. There's also, in law, the ability of the utility to charge the customers for the improvements necessary to accommodate their systems. We're not proposing to do that right now. But that in law is there. It requires us to do that. So we haven't done that yet. So the reason the 1.5% was there was to protect the rest of the system. The other cap that's there, which has been alluded to incorrectly, is the 90% number. The 90% is a cap that exists in the FPL agreements, which we've been told are the best ones we should mirror, right? That 90% actually comes from the FPL agreement. It's there as well. It's a limit on the size of a system to not be greater than 90% of what the service line to the home can accommodate, or to the business. The reason for that is to protect the service line and protect the system. Contrary to what some people in the audience may believe, that's not something that we concocted out of greed because we didn't want to lose money or lose customers. That's in the interconnection agreements that FPL uses, not uncommon in the industry, to limit the size of a system to no more than what the wires connecting the home to the system can physically carry. And in fact is there to help protect the customer, because if the customer were to buy a system that was bigger than that, and we had approved it, and that line ultimately burned down or caused damage to the home, there'd be some thought that we would have some liability there.
And we should be able to finance the increase of the cost of the line from the main line to the house.
Right.
So that's really not a restriction on solar.
That's correct.
So I don't want to say it's a fear tactic, but it's something that we can deal with.
I think there's this presumption that about staff's desires or integrity and reason for doing this stuff that's been put forth by many people.
Well,
it's not factual. It's difficult to accept as a professional, because that's not
Do you think that in the resolution coming forward with net metering, there's going to be a tiered system of allowing more than 10 kV to sell back at equal rate of what we're paying?
Based on what we're hearing at the UAB, and based on what we're hearing in the public, and also based on what we're hearing from the commission, those it would certainly be something that could be considered. At this point, I'm probably not going to rule out putting it in there, because everybody wants to have it. Part of me says, that's what you want? Okay.
Well, I think
but that's a part of my view. So I'm here to help protect the system and give you guidance. But
Thank you.
If regardless of that, that's what people want. Then you can vote. Then you can have your vote and decide what you want to do with it.
Well, I'm interested in doing that. We talk about demographic change. The people that are moving into Lake Worth are moving here because we are a progressive town. They do have the ability to invest in solar, and I in no way want to discourage those investments. I am looking forward to this resolution that is going to encourage solar usage and not discourage it in any way.
Mr. Hardy?
So we have a cap, a 1.5% cap in the interconnection agreement on basically the amount of capacity that we can buy from people who have solar panels on their roofs. Is that the cap that they're referring?
It's not quite accurate, so I'll correct it. It's a cap of 1.5%, not on the capacity we'd buy, because we're not buying their capacity.
On the
We buy
capacity
the
that
energy that
exists.
they produce.
Sure.
The total installed capacity we
Sure.
capped at
Okay.
1.5%, and that was the reason why we did it. It had to do with our thoughts that it shouldn't be greater than our own system, which we already have to disconnect.
I appreciate the correction. Now, you said that we will remove that cap if we make some improvements, for example, install a second tie line.
That would be one of the improvements that we can make. Ultimately,
What would be some of the other improvements that we would? What would be some of the other improvements that would have to be made, and would any of these improvements be made as a part of the capital program that we discussed last week in the budget workshop?
yes, they are in that, and not because of this issue specifically,
Right.
but it helps this issue.
Right.
For example, substations with adequate ability to control voltage, sags and swells in the system.
Yeah. Well,
Excuse
Motion
me,
to-
hold on one second. We started this conversation at 7:10. We're not there yet. I will take a motion to extend.
Motion to extend.
Please remember, if we move it to a workshop, it's not coming back at the next meeting for a vote.
Motion to
So
extend.
I'm a little opposed to moving it to a workshop.
Second.
Motion, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carry on.
Okay, so what I'm getting at here is that the improvements that need to be made in order to accommodate capacity greater than 1.5%, right, are coming. We've planned to do them.
That's correct. They're laid out in the
Okay.
system hardening reliability and program.
So
which is
what?
in the capital plan.
Okay, so and we expect these improvements to be made over the next few years. No?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Do we expect capacity to grow beyond 1.5% over the next few years?
We expect that our system peak will grow, which in fact it has, and you'll see next presentation, you'll see the numbers. So the 1.5% will become a bigger and bigger number because the system peak is continuing to grow. So the 1.5% is a percent tied to a number that you multiply against. Right now, the system peak is 97. Not that long ago, it was only 95. So it's growing all the time.
Okay, and so you said that you'd be prepared to remove this cap if we made these improvements.
That's correct. And we would look at it.
Is that in the contract? Okay, so it's not in the contract. Would it automatically
have clauses for things that we would remove? Certainly,
Okay, that's
this
fine.
commission could review things and change them anytime you wanted.
would it automatically come back to the commission once these improvements get made? So I guess what I'm saying is if residents didn't bring us this issue by complaining to us and petitioning us as they should, how would we have known that this is something that we need to remove after we've made the necessary capital improvements to the system?
So let's posit a few theories on how that might happen. A, we have a tickler in the file that says revisit this. That's one way. The other way is that as people apply, let's assume for the moment that we did hit the cap. I don't know if that's going to happen. That's twice what we have today, by the way.
So you don't know if it's going to happen.
Exactly. I don't know if we're going to get to the cap.
So why do we?
But we want it.
If we know that we're making the improvements by a certain date, and you don't know, you don't
No, we
believe.
don't know.
I'm sorry, but he just said like what you just said was that you don't know if we were going to hit the cap.
I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole again. We don't know we're going to make these improvements. You tell me when you're going to approve them. I'll tell you when
We
we're
haven't voted on the improvement.
Just as we haven't voted on a tie line, but we have a consent agenda item to do design work on the tie line. Like we're going to do the stuff that we said we're going to do, the stuff that we said going to do for the past several years. Like this is not a matter of dispute.
We are putting the pieces
and
in.
Just excuse me, I have the floor. And just last week we talked about how necessary these capital improvements were, and about how we can't do anything but do these capital improvements. Now here we're saying, oh, the capital improvements are in doubt, therefore we need this capacity. Come on, man. Look, I have a problem. I have a problem with the way that this was done. And look, the people who are upset in the back, they have some feelings that I understand are at odds with Mr. Liberty's feelings, but they didn't trick themselves into having these feelings. The people here who are upset about this have been treated a certain way, and how they feel, their anger, their disappointment, all of that stuff comes from decisions that were made in this building and other buildings that are owned by them, right? And that's kind of the problem that I have with this. I don't like the interconnection agreement. That's why I really argued against some of the provisions in there. I don't like a lot of what we're trying to do by limiting people's rights. And I don't know if Bert Harris applies to this. It'll be interesting, but man, like we're basically taking away the rights that people have, and for what? Like, I haven't been convinced that this is something that we absolutely need to do, but yet we've done it because anyway.
Okay.
All right, I'm done.
Well,
hold on one second. So the contracts, doesn't FP&L have a contract? Does everyone else? At one point I heard we were the only ones without contracts.
I'm not aware that we're the only ones without them. I know the law says we have to have them, and FPL does in fact.
And okay, so remind us how we got here. That's how it originally came up. Is the law? We identified that the law said we had to have a contract, and for whatever reason, we didn't have a contract.
That's correct. The net metering laws of the state of Florida required that there be that the cities or the municipal utilities and larger utilities all have a program. We in fact had a program. It also required that we have interconnection agreements. There were no such interconnection agreements in Lake Worth, so we had to create them.
So I heard somebody one time said, "Why do you need a contract? Why even do the contract? Why do we need a contract?" You just answered that question, but why are we talking about not having a contract? Why would that be in the best interest of our utilities? I think I'm just making a statement because again, the utilities is a business, and we've heard here tonight, they're just money. Well, unfortunately, we inherited a business that moves $8 million over to your general fund that pays for the services that you like. So we had in our last budget meeting, we're talking about weaning ourselves off of that so we could actually put money back into the utilities. So, we're not necessarily, chasing your money, but certain things it's just the right thing to do. I'm not interested in everything that I'm seeing tonight. I'm interested in having a contract because it's the right thing to do. Everyone should have a contract. When you sign your house, you have a contract. When you buy your house, there's reasons why we do that. The other issue I have is on behalf of all the other utility payers, I have a problem paying back more than we buy off the open market. That to me is just common sense, that we don't pay. We're not paying everyone else and I get, you're doing, and I'm as green as they come. If you come by my business, I've got every green possible thing you can see. But again, this is also a business that gives services to everyone in this room, whether you have solar or not. Commissioner Robinson?
No, I was following your thought. I'm interested in this tie line vote and having the cap of 1.5 as part of that vote. Is that?
That's not on the agenda tonight, but you can bring it up when we talk.
The 1.5 is. The 1.5 is. Is that doable?
It certainly is doable. Let me explain the 1.5% again. It was a number that we arrived at knowing that we have problems with our own system, our own solar system, which is about that size, and saying, we have a problem with that, so now we're exacerbating the problem. We have in our capital program suggested and put out a number of capital projects that go out a number of years, which have yet to be approved. And the source of funding for those projects has yet to be identified. If we do all those projects, and I don't say we have to do every single one before we can remove the cap, doing those problems will begin to solve the problem that we believe we have. For example, being able to monitor and control voltage on the circuits where these systems may be installed. We don't know where they're going to be installed. They could be installed anywhere in the city on any circuit. There may be some circuits where it doesn't matter how big the system is. There may be other systems, problems in smaller ones. What we're saying is a cap. We said, let's start at 1.5%. If customers push up against the cap, let's assume for the moment that we have a huge subscription. It's possible that we do. And it pushes up against the cap. We would then have to come back to you and say, it's time to move the cap, or we really do need the cap. Because I suspect that if we hit the cap, customers are going to be coming in and say, I can't install because you've got this cap. And you'd ask us, why is there a cap? Why can't, John and Lucy install a system on XYZ drive? Okay, let's take a look at it. If it's not a problem in XYZ cap, we would revisit it.
I don't want to revisit it. I want to set to the future so that there's no question that there's no limit to solar in Lake Worth. Is that possible?
If anything's possible.
Not geared to taking a look at it, but
As a policy matter, yes. It's
how are we going to establish what this resolution is going to look like? Are we going to vote on? There'd be no voting tonight. Well, no, all right.
They're taking consensus.
We're listening to the
Because-
conversation. We're taking input, and then from that we will bring a document which you can then vote on, and you can modify it as you wish in your process, and then. But we're literally sitting in we're throwing darts hoping to hit the room in the dark here. We needed some guidance from you. That's why this was just a discussion matter on issues which were not new. These are all issues that were in this book that we wanted to talk about. We need some guidance on what to put into that resolution, recognizing that even then, there's going to be some changes at that meeting based on amendments that may be put forward by commissioners. But we don't want to put something out there that is so far from what you might even be willing to consider that it doesn't work. So this is to narrow the scope of that down.
And just for a moment, for the people in the audience, I know some of it's your first time meeting. So what he's referring to is it will come back in an ordinance form to a commission meeting where we actually have the ability to vote on it. It will get 2 readings. The first reading, it'll come and it'll pass us.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry?
It'll be a resolution.
I mean a resolution.
One
What I
reading.
say, an ordinance,
One
resolution. We will have a chance to go through it prior to, and we will also have time to make changes in that first reading. We will hear from the public. The second time it comes back, hopefully will be a complete document.
Mr. Chair, as a resolution, there'd just be one meeting.
Oh, it's only one reading?
It'd be one reading. Now, if there are substantial changes, the direction
It'll
may
come
be
back.
to bring it back for a
That's why
second
I'm-
meeting.
Okay. So, did that answer your question?
I'm concerned about the consensus and the direction that we're giving. I would like unanimity on promoting solar as
I
Lake
think
Worth.
we're all there.
Well, I haven't heard. I've only.
This isn't the first time we've had a talk about solar.
Well, and the mayor isn't here, and I haven't heard from Commissioner Maxwell.
Okay.
In
City
his
manager?
enthusiasm for solar.
City manager?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think we've gotten good input on all the various items from Commissioner Hardy. It'd be really good if each one of y'all could go through and actually provide.
Give that to him. It's dead. His is dead.
Oh, thank you.
Already talking.
Lights on, but nobody's home. The only thing that concerns me about this conversation, because when this was first brought up months ago, we actually were preparing a resolution to address what was in the original one, because the big issue at that time was we do realize rooftop solar is a growing fact of life. It's something that you're going to see. It's just, and people have all kinds of feelings about it. It was about the rate that we were paying. And at that time, back earlier in the year, that generated probably the most difficult conversations. And at that time, we were also having problems with reorganizing and figuring out what to do with the EUAB. There was disagreement between staff. There was disagreement on the commission level. And all that conspired to get us to this point. It sounds like we've come a long way, I think Justin said it, there was good conversation at the UAB. There's actually a lot of agreement here on moving forward. And I'd really encourage the commission at this point, let's get down into the meat of resolving what we can so we can provide that. So I have a whole, and it's really interesting to hear, especially from some of the newer residents that have moved in the city in the last few years. It seems to be there's just this amnesia or a lack of understanding of how we got to where we were with this electric utility and this city, and the fact we have almost a 9 millage rate. This is a very financially challenged city. And the electric utility is suffering from 40 to 50 years of benign neglect. It has not been invested in like it should have been, and that's not unique to Lake Worth. But don't be naive or ignorant, and don't talk in platitudes, missing the point that for once in memory from a lot of people, we finally got the competency and the capability of staff and financing to actually undo that 40 to 50 years. And we are on the cusp of it. I'm sitting here grabbing the edge of the desk listening to this conversation. We're talking about rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. We need to fix the fundamentals here. Yes, solar is important. Solar is the future. I believe in solar. I got an electric car and a hybrid car. I would love to put yes, there's no argument, I think, from staff or from the policy board or from the residents. We're all in agreement on that. But don't have this conversation and beat the electric utility that you own. This is not FP&L. You guys own this thing. You are the shareholders. Each one of you have one share and one vote. And when you talk bad about the electric, you're pointing the fingers at yourselves. This group up here for the first time is having monthly electric utility board of directors meeting in the public. You can't get more transparent than this. Warts and all, it ain't perfect, but we're doing it. And we're not that far from getting some resolution on these key components and getting back to the big one that we were looking at, because we're scraping for every dollar in the electric utility to put towards improvements into the transmission distribution system. There are parts of our system that, we kind of joke about how bad the reliability is. We need to fix that. We have a responsibility, but we need to do it in a thoughtful manner. And while this is a de minimis part of the overall picture in our revenues, every dollar matters and how we go forward. So if we can get to some of this resolution, I'll get off my high horse here, but please don't talk about your electric utility negatively as if it's out to get you. It is you. And you've got to, that was very cynical. You've got to get to a point where we can get some agreement. So let's give us this.
Commissioner
Please.
Hardy.
Let's get to the end of this.
Look,
Stop talking.
First of all, in an ideal world, everything that happens in this building and other buildings that are owned by the taxpayers, everything reflects exactly what it is that the taxpayers and residents of this city want. But sometimes there's a disconnect. And I think the presence of people in this room who have some issues is evidence that there's a disconnect. Also, a lot of these people in this room moved here very recently. I know I moved here 5 years, 3 months ago. And I can tell you, among people who moved here recently and among people who have chosen not to move here, right? Mm-hmm. They don't care what our story is. They don't care about how 8 years ago there were all these problems and it took so long and we've come a long way. The fact is we're not where we need to be competitive with other people here in the state. They don't care. They don't. They really don't. They don't. So the onus is on us every day to solve our problems and to not make excuses for the problems that we have and for the things that we're doing right now. Now, on this front here, I think that this whole process up here on the dais about giving consensus without voting is a little too wishy-washy for me. I think we should, the same way that we might, for example, we've done questionnaires in the past where we filled out, like a written questionnaire and turned it into the clerk or turned it into you. I think that's what we need. I think we need these questions submitted in writing to us in the form of a questionnaire, and we go on record in writing saying how we feel about each of these items, so that way, the next time we have a discussion about making policy around net metering, everyone in the audience knows exactly how we feel, and we can't change it, and we can't obfuscate, and we, it's in writing, 5 pages, 1 page from each of us. I think that's what we need to do. I don't think it's appropriate to do it the way to basically promulgate public policy without a vote or without some way to tell people explicitly how we feel about it. I don't like it.
I'm sorry. May I?
Commissioner Robbins.
I'd like to move forward to give Ed direction to come back on the 6th with a resolution that's going to emphasize how interested we are in solar power. So can we go down this list and simply just a consensus by either saying yes or raise your hand?
Give us your thoughts.
For and against. I interested in a tiered system, allowing in a larger home, a larger capacity, and paying a minimal incentive to have solar panels. The cap on installed capacity is, I've already talked about, payment production in excess of customers' needs. What amount should customers? I just want to be fair to everybody. I certainly think that the existing grandfathered solar people should be paying for the system that everybody else is paying for. I know, I believe in my heart that we subsidize tobacco for goodness sake. We subsidize oil companies. We subsidize. I would like to subsidize solar panels in Lake Worth. Current customers in service territory install solar panels monthly. We can go down this list and get consensus. Let's start at the top.
Go ahead.
Okay, I've stated.
Are you finished?
Well, monthly. Are we going to vote on all of it at once?
No, you're giving your thoughts. Each one of us will give our thoughts, just like we usually do.
Grandfathering. Let's be fair to the people that have invested, but when you buy stock, it goes up and down. We need to tie it to a rate of. In 5 years, we're going to be renegotiating purchasing power. Is that correct? And we need to tie it to some index.
It was a 7-year contract with an opener at the end of 4, so that would be at mid-23, late 23, we'll be renegotiating the opener, if you will.
I would like to have an indexed return on solar panel. Anyhow, that's it.
Mr. Hardy?
Thank you.
Yes to a tiered system, no to a cap on total installed capacity. Yes to payments for productions in excess of a customer's needs. There are details about that, exactly what rate are we going to pay. I would like to pay a generous rate. I think the rate that we're paying is fine, provided that the person is homesteaded. I'm very okay with that, but there are details that need to be fleshed out. Minimum billing, yes, and I think that we should. I think the payments for production in excess of a customer's needs is tied to minimum billing. If you have a high enough minimum bill for everyone in the system, including people who have solar on their roofs, it can, basically allow us to pay for, the cost of distributing power to people, because they're using that distribution system, as Ed has said repeatedly, like a battery. So if you charge them a fair enough minimum bill, then it should be okay for us to provide payments to them for production in excess of a customer's needs. Annual balancing or cash out. That's what I'm in favor of. It gives people more flexibility. And on grandfathering, I don't think that people who had a system installed under one set of rules should have the rules, changed in the middle of the game. And so then there's a question that I don't think we've spoken to, anyone here has, as to how long these people should be grandfathered in. Should it be the life of their system? Should it be for how long they right? Because if it's for the life of the system, property changes hands, the system's still viable. Well, yeah, but people pay for that system. When they buy that home, they pay for that system. So the system's still viable. Does that grandfathering still apply? These are details, and we're not doing it right. This process, this is too wishy-washy. This needs to be in writing. We need a detailed questionnaire with all of these issues fleshed out so that we can answer in the affirmative or the negative for each of these and have it be in writing. This process is not a good process for this. It's not. And it's not fair to residents who expect more for, they should be able to hold us accountable. We've made it difficult for them to hold us accountable.
Commissioner Hardy, I understand what you're saying, and
but you don't care. I get you understand, but you don't care.
Absolutely, do not accuse me of not caring. I was going to finish my comment. Would you like to move forward tonight with something? I totally agree with you, and that can come back at another time. But if we want to move, you want to move, they want to move forward tonight with something that's going to come back to us in the near future, fine. But if it doesn't happen like we usually do it tonight, then I don't see it coming back that quickly.
Mr. Chair, the reason why these people feel such a great sense of urgency is because we hastily placed a moratorium on their ability to get solar. So the fact that there's any urgency to this matter is our fault to begin with. So now
I'm not
we want
arguing
to accept
that.
the process.
I'm arguing the process right now.
Right,
and you keep going back to the transparency and what you don't like about it.
Because
I'm
this is
trying to get
government.
I'm trying to get us through this meeting tonight so we can move
And how
forward
does
for
the mayor
these
feel
people.
about it?
So she's not here tonight.
And that's part of the problem.
You've said quite often, if they're not here, they don't get a vote.
But yet at the same time, the people here in the audience and the people at home should be able to understand what's in the mayor's mind about this
And
issue
again, I
so that
can't
they
speak.
can-
I'm not going to argue with you tonight. I cannot speak for the mayor. I'm speaking for myself. And we're going to carry on tonight. This is what we have in front of us. So hopefully we can move forward. We can lift the moratorium as soon as we can.
We could have lifted the moratorium months
Commissioner Maxwell, did you have
The moratorium should have been placed to begin with.
Commissioner Maxwell?
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Mayor. First of all, I think Commissioner Robinson said it best, or maybe it was you, Vice Mayor. And I think we can speak for the mayor in this respect. We all believe in solar power. We all believe that it's a great idea. We all believe that it's a great investment. And we all agree it's the right thing to do. Now, having said that, you know, I've listened to some of the folks that have systems already installed in their homes that have been in place for a number of years. And the first question in my mind that comes to my mind is, at this point, have they been negatively economically impacted? And the answer in my mind is no, they have not.
Not that I'm aware of.
There's been no financial impact to the existing customers at this point. Okay? So what I think I'm hearing from folks is a lot of emotion, a lot of desperation. I will apologize to the extent that I can apologize that when we passed this net metering program back in the day, that we somehow didn't manage to comply with Florida state law. Another example of how this city, over the years, has run amok, and we don't always get the information we're supposed to get. And this is one of, when you talk about governing, you know, most municipalities don't have the benefit of having a utility to manage as well. An electric utility is an extremely complex enterprise. Okay? So it's one thing to govern up here on a given issue that isn't utility related, and staff makes their recommendations, the public makes their comments and their recommendations, and we have our opinions, and somehow we mash it all together and we get Italian sausage when it's all done. The process isn't pretty sometimes, but we do get a finished product. But when it comes to electric utility, we'd be damn fools not to take a large measure of advice from our staff and take a real hard look at all the possible and ask as many questions as possible. The longer this conversation goes on, the more questions I have. Mm-hmm. Now, to your point, Commissioner Hardy, I don't like this process at all. And I'm not willing to sit here and commit one way or the other on these bullet points, because more questions have been raised in my mind tonight than I had before I walked through the door. But the most important thing that I'm getting out of this, excuse me?
I'm interested in your questions because the staff.
One at a time.
You know.
One at a time.
The most important thing that I think I've gotten out of this meeting tonight is that the current customer base that have solar systems have not been negatively financially impacted. They may be wondering what's going to happen in the future, and that's up to us to figure that out, and we will figure that out. We must be fair, okay? We must be fair. That's number one. Number two, and I don't know how to say this any other way, and we have spent years trying to wean our dependency on the utility to fill the general fund so we could lower your utility rates. We spent years doing that. We had the reputation of having some of the highest utility rates on planet Earth back in the day, on top of some of the highest taxes in Palm Beach County at 9 mills. So you got high taxes, you got high utilities. It's the perfect storm. Nobody wants to invest in a community that has high taxes and high utilities. We've done our job up here to get those utility rates down. And as it was mentioned earlier by one of our residents, well, geez, you got this dismal financial picture for the utility going forward. Yes, it is. It's going to be tough. It's really going to be tough. Now, we can raise the rates back to where they were 5, 6, 7 years ago, and that changes completely. It changes completely. But we're not going to do that, because in order to get new people to move in, like good people, like everybody in this room, we have to be competitive in the marketplace. Utilities is something that we cannot be saddled with a legacy issue of utilities. And we certainly aren't going to raise property taxes. We are certainly not going to raise property taxes. It is not fiscally advisable to do that. If we raise property taxes, we only got one more mill to go with. That's going to get us $1 million a year. $1 million a year in revenue. That doesn't go very far in a city like Lake Worth Beach. So we can max it out at 10 mills, and then we'll be the laughing stock of the property tax world. We got the highest taxes. So I'm looking forward to having a meeting with Ed Liberty at our earliest convenience and going over some of these new questions that I have. But for those of you who think that we're trying to curb or thwart anybody's efforts in solar energy, you couldn't be further from the truth. Absolutely could not be further from the truth. I am, of the 5 of us up here, I'm the least likely to get out there and talk about green this and green that. I don't get excited about that so much. I'll tell you why. We have people in this community that don't have jobs. We have people in this community that can't pay their bills. We have neighborhoods, some neighborhoods, that are in really, really bad shape, and people are worried about the crime in their neighborhood. My focus is rebuilding our neighborhoods, improving our economy to create jobs, if possible, to have better job opportunities. That's my focus. But on the same hand, on the other hand, I should say, I am tickled to death to think that in 2 or 3 or 4 years, we're going to have, what, 50+% of clean, green, renewable energy? What municipality in the state of Florida can brag about that? Well, we set the stage to do all those things. And what you all in this room, you're contributing to that. We just want to come up with the best possible product, end product that benefits both you and the city for sustained growth. So more good people like you can move into the city of Lake Worth. That's all I have, Vice Mayor.
Okay. Okay. At this point, Ed, I know that you've gotten some direction. City manager, usually at this point, we would have staff again. Commissioner Maxwell's going to meet with staff. I would suggest the mayor also, and get us to that point.
And Vice Mayor, I don't know that it was said, but the mayor is in the middle of a move is the reason she's not here. So she's moving boxes right now. So, yeah, we'll follow up on that. Are we still looking to bring this back on the 6th?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Be ready
Hold on. I'm sorry, City Attorney?
I believe would have to be ready tomorrow.
There's no way. Either it's already ready, right? Okay, so it's not ready. There's no draft.
I'm not aware of it from a legal standpoint.
Okay, so I don't see how this can be done in any serious way by tomorrow. And again, the urgency comes from the fact that we placed a moratorium on these people. That's where the urgency comes from. So we put ourselves under the gun here unnecessarily. By the way, after we placed it, we had opportunities to remove the moratorium, and we refused to do that. Right? That's where the urgency is coming from. So now that we decided that we're going to place this moratorium and we're going to keep it on, we should do it right. We should do it right. And this is not.
When is our
legit.
next meeting? The 20th?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the deadline that we put on ourselves, the end of August.
The end of August.
By the way, people have missed 4 months of the year when the tax incentive is expiring at the end of the year. We blocked out a third of the year and made it impossible for them to get this. This is on us.
Mr. Liberty, I heard something about tax expiring, and then I heard somebody else told me that they weren't. What is that?
I'm
Yeah,
not a
there's
not a
sunset.
tax expert, but I'm not aware that the tax is expiring. I do believe it's decreasing from 30% to 26% on the investment tax credit, but it's
Okay,
Okay,
so
so
okay, I just want to make sure.
The economic incentive is lessening after this
Okay, that's
year.
not what was quoted, though.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
That's
fine.
One last for you, Commissioner Robinson.
I'm interested in, we're here to deliberate the best possible solution to the question. And if we have questions, I think that questions breed questions, obviously, and Commissioner Maxwell has questions. He's going to go directly to Mr. Liberty. Sunshine is not going to allow us to know what the questions are. Would they? I think that the more transparent we have in interaction with staff, the better our transparency situation is. And it bothers me that that we don't get enough communication among ourselves, the five of us. I just think that if Commissioner Maxwell has any questions, I would be interested in hearing them publicly.
Duly noted. Okay, thank you. We will, hopefully you have some direction.
we've now brought a lot of transparency. I think
Yes.
This is something that maybe some people would not have preferred to have transparent, but it's here. And we've made it very transparent with now 2 good discussions here. At least 1 very good discussion at the UAB, a lot of opportunity for people to sit with us one-on-one. And so we'll bring something forward, and there's a fraction of this is technical, a lot of it's policy. And you can give us direction on the policy that you want, and we'll bring you a document which we believe you can, have more discussion around and vote on.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. We have participation on non-agenda items. Remember that we've already talked about net metering. Do you have something on non-agenda items?
I'm not sure. Some of those are confusing.
Sarah Maleka, is she still here? She went to the bathroom. We'll come back to her. What is that? I have 2 for that.
Sheila Dufault.
Sheila Dufault, and I have 2 for you, for non. Is she still here?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, microphone. Ed, can we get a microphone? Sorry.
I'm Sheila Dufault. I live at 704 First Avenue South. I'm one of the 790 people that received a ridiculous deposit demand.
That's for later in the meeting.
We actually have that on the agenda. It's for later in the meeting. So,
Later in this meeting?
correct. We'll ask you to get back up shortly.
Okay,
This is on non-agenda items. That's actually an agenda item.
all right. I did have a non-agenda, but I can't call.
Okay, did you have anything else on non-agenda? I do have 2 cards for you.
Yes.
But did you have anything else on non-agenda?
Yes, actually. Thank you for asking. The last time I was here was 4 years ago, April. The last time I stood at this dais. I was not disabled. I spoke to the city council requesting that we start the bus service back to the beach. I spoke about people that there's a whole generation, I'm a teacher. There's a whole generation of children out west of town that have never been to our beach because their families do not have cars. I am now disabled. I can't drive. I have no way to get to the beach unless I Uber. I'm on Social Security. I have very limited funds, and I can't get to the beach. I want to know when the mayor promised, April of 2015, gave me her word that the bus was going to be started up within a year. It has not happened. The bus stop has been completely removed at the beach. It does not exist. It was there before the bridge work. It is not there now. So I'm speaking for a lot of people. I'm in my 60s. I'm disabled. I want my beach. I want to be able to get to the beach. When is that going to happen?
Usually we don't respond. However, I have been working with the mayor on this issue for quite a long time, and it's Palm Beach County. Originally, when we started negotiation, the county wanted $200,000. We fought them and said we had a bus prior to construction. We weren't paying for it. We want it back. As of today, I believe we have come to a conclusion where we will not be paying the $200,000. However, we have to build a new bus stop.
Yeah.
At our additional cost. It's actually coming forward in this year's budget. It has to be a little bigger and better because things have changed with ADA and things. But we are moving forward. I can't promise you when because it's government and it's county and, but we are working forward and we do have that in the works.
Okay.
Okay.
I did hear this 4 years ago.
I agree. But
Just
again,
make that
it's not us. It's not the city. It's the county. So they work a little slower.
Okay, what part of the county is?
Palm Beach County. It's Palm Tran. We're working with Palm Tran.
Okay, when I spoke to Palm Tran 4 years ago, they told me that it was going to cost $40,000 4 years ago. I spoke with the director of Palm Tran.
Well, that's just for the bus shelter. That was the quote that they quoted us then. It's a little bit more now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Maleka.
I apologize for stepping out. I was trying to wait as long as possible. Sarah Maliga, 408 Southeast Street. I would like to thank you, Commission, for calling me up tonight. I would like to address a few issues. According to the city charter, which I will pass out, if you could pass this down, please, City Manager. Section 2(3), the Utilities Director is required to establish a bona fide residence within 6 months of taking position. When you visit the Utilities office and ask for the Director's contact because it's not found on the city website anywhere, you will receive a card with a written name of Ed Liberty, which I was given today. Ed Liberty is the Utilities Director according to his staff and does not reside within the city of Lake Worth Beach, and I would like to see our city charter abided by. It's your job to carry that through. Which brings me to issue number 2. The Utilities Advisory Board, which according to section 22235, which I just passed out to you both, to all of you, says, the board's purpose is to advise the city commission on behalf of and for the benefit of the citizens and the residents of the city on electric utilities policies, plans, and programs. The board will advise the city commission on the establishment of fair and equitable policies, plans, and programs that are consistent with customers' needs, legal mandates, public policy, operational requirements, and the long-term financial stability and viability of the electric utilities. I bring this up because we have had some conversation and some things going around the news in regards to the letters that have gone out for the city deposits. Has the board had a chance to give any opinion on this new security deposit demand letters? What was their advice to the city commission on this item? Issue number 3 is the city manager is supposed to follow direction from the elected officials, not write his own administrative order, which I have been told that none of the city commissioners approved or saw before it went out. That was dated July 15th, 2019, stating that this order applies to the residential utility customers who have established a service deposit according to Section 4 of Resolution 70, 2013. Residential service deposits will no longer be refunded after a continuous service period of 25 months and a satisfactory payment record during the previous 12 months in the form of a credit to the corresponding account. Instead, service deposits will now be refunded in the form of a check payable to the persons who establish a utility account once the services are terminated. The final bill is paid in full and any other indebtedness to the city is paid. So, my question is, if the city manager is supposed to respond to elected officials, according to the definition of this administrative order, it's enforceable order issued by a public authority under the powers conferred to it by one of the more statutes to an individual, an organization, to take care of certain corrective action or to refrain from activity. Did the city commission know about this, vote on it, give permission for this to happen when we haven't voted on what's on the agenda today? These things are going out. But yet when you go to the utilities department today and you ask for an application, on the back of the application, it says in black and white that I'm getting my security deposit back. Now, this isn't an issue that I have a problem with because I've gotten mine. But this is misleading to the 18 people who are at the utility companies today signing up for a new electric.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on, consent agenda. Is there a motion?
The approval of the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry, approval of the minutes.
So
Took me a
moved.
minute to put my glasses on. Second?
Second.
It's getting old.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Approval of consent agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Do we have an understanding that the condition of this second tie line is going to include?
That's not on the consent agenda.
Okay.
The design work.
Oh,
is
the
on
design work.
It's a step.
But no one pulled it. Okay, so
Which is
we're
part
not-
of the problem with this agenda.
can we have conversation, or it was just gonna die for lack of second?
Well, right now, I think we just have the motion to approve. Is
Correct.
there a second?
There is not.
Okay, so right now, there's no approval of consent.
Okay.
I'll move on to next new business then.
Okay. Motion dies for lack of second. Resolution. New business A. Resolution 36-2019, utility deposits. Who's leading?
Was there any way we can know whether?
Is there?
Pulled it prior to. Who's leading?
There would need to be a motion and a.
I know, I'm just trying to make sure staff's in the room. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
No.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
this is for discussion. This is,
Yeah, so, I'm
Wait.
taking
well,
his lead.
This,
Yes, hold on. Staff's in the room now. Carry on.
We were going to turn it over to Franco, our manager of customer service, to talk about the issue of additional bill deposits and the other matters that we had on billing as well. So I'll turn it over to Franco. I believe you have already received some packages, or he has additional information for you. So part of what prompted this was looking at what we were required to do. When this area began reporting to me, this became obviously something that I needed to look at more closely. Looking at the resolutions that govern this process, it was apparent that we had little latitude in the language, or no latitude in the language, to not bill these additional deposits. As a matter of fact, the language, I believe, said shall increase these deposits. It didn't give us the latitude to do otherwise. So we began to implement what the resolution said, that it shall be done.
When was the resolution written?
I believe 2013.
Thank you. Yes.
So there was no other choice for us but to begin to implement it. It's obvious that if you're one of the people that gets ensnared or trapped or caught in this situation of having, tripped across one of these line items, maybe ensnared is not the right way to say it, but if you're in this unfortunate situation, we don't have the latitude to look the other way and say, never mind. So we also asked and realizing what pain this was causing for customers, we asked that there be some allowance given, that customers be given some period of time to catch up. But if we go back and look at this over time, we realize that the city had lost over $5 million of billings that went out for collections that were in excess of what customer deposits covered. And that was over a period of time going back years to 2012, I believe. Correct? That number had decreased dramatically from 2012 to the most recent year, 2018, which was roughly $450,000. Those were amounts that we were unable to collect from our customers after we got the deposits back. In some cases, these customers had no deposit. And that amount went out for collections, and very little of that are experiences maybe in the 10 to 15% range, if that comes back to us once it goes out to collections. So we felt the need to stem the tide, if you will, of this uncollectible amount that disappears and in effect comes out of the utility coffers, is no longer available to the community to use for reinvestment or anything else it wants to do with this money. So the money's gone. And we had no latitude to say, you can't do it. Further analysis of the data showed that the vast majority was related to tenant-occupied properties. And when we looked at the patterns that we saw, not just in tenant properties, but if customers are adept at realizing, the ones that have defaulted, that if you play by the rules and get your deposit back, you then have no deposit and you have no liability other than your current bill. And when we looked at the defaults that we had, they were customers who had been given their deposit back at some point in the past and who had subsequently either not had any issues or had tripped some threshold and the deposit was not rebilled as it should have been. So we began to implement exactly what the resolution said. And I keep using the word shall because it actually says you shall do these things. And I said, I'm bound. I've got to do it because it says so. So that's when we started implementing it. The numbers do get large, and we've begun to collect those additional billed deposits. We've billed an additional, I think, $225,000, $250,000. Correction, $319,000 now, as per the resolution. So as an interim solution to ease that pain, we got from the city manager an administrative order which allowed us to spread that additional deposit over a period of time. That's why that was done. This isn't a policy matter. Just as we want staff to do things, this is one of the things that staff is bound to do. If we're given relief and you decide as a matter of policy that you want to change that, then we'll change that. But right now, staff is looking at a resolution that says we shall do this, and a temporary or albeit an administrative order from the city manager which gives us a period of time to spread those additional payments over for these customers. It is difficult as staff to be in front of customers who are in distress over this. But we don't have the latitude to do otherwise. And that's
And Mr. City Manager,
the 6-month period. Yeah.
Commissioner Harding.
You're saying the reason that you're enforcing this provision that hadn't been enforced before was because it was a policy that was promulgated by not necessarily the people who sit on this board, but this board, and that when policy gets created by this board and voted and ratified, staff has to execute the policy as long as they know about it. Is that correct?
That's how I feel about it. And when this came to my area,
Okay, Mr. City Manager, do you feel the same way?
Yeah,
Okay. So I can understand that, right? The problem is I have an executive or an administrative order by the city manager, and it acts on a principle the opposite of what was just expressed or agreed to, right? So here we are saying that we can't, staff can't do things that directly contravene policy that's been voted on and ratified by this board. And the policy that is still in place today, because this board voted on it, says residential service deposits shall be refunded to the depositors, shall be, after a continuous service period of 25 months, provided that the customer has a satisfactory payment record, the customer has not in the previous 12 months made more than one late payment of a bill, had a check returned for non-payment, et cetera, right? I have an executive order here, or an administrative order here that says the opposite. The administrative order, which was put into place on 7/15, says, instead, service deposits will now be refunded in the form of a check payable to the persons who established the utility account once the services are terminated. The final bill is paid in full and any other indebtedness to the city is paid, right? So that sentence directly contradicts policy that this board voted on and passed. Now, the reason why I brought that up is because it seems clear to me that it's not necessarily the case that staff feels that they must always follow or implement policy that's been voted on or ratified by this board, because here we have an administrative order that does the exact opposite of that. So when staff feels the need to have that flexibility, it would appear, and this order is evidence, that they do what they need to create that flexibility, even if it directly contradicts policy that we've passed. But in other cases, they feel bound by the policies that we've passed, right? So, my thing is, if you feel that you can do basically whatever it is that you want for a short period of time, because that was the justification that I got with the city manager when I asked him about this and about how the fact that it was contradictory to the policy that we passed, well, I said, oh, it's only for a short period of time. Well, what you could have done for a short period of time, if you feel that you have the ability to do the opposite of what's passed by this board, is to say, you know what? I understand that this is written, just as you said here, I understand this is written, but the better thing is to not have people retroactively adjust their deposits so that they now all of a sudden have several $100s that they have to pay us that they didn't know about and that they didn't plan in their budget, right? If you're going to directly contradict policy that's passed by the city, I think we should do it in a way that benefits the residents, not in a way that necessarily benefits the utility, which is a part of the city. I can understand why you did it, but I don't like that that's the way this rolled. So, my thing is, and it was said earlier that in order to attract residents, we have to be competitive. That's what it was said. I agree with that, but we have to really look at what competitive means, okay? This city has had such a bad reputation on the utilities for such a long time that it affects people's behavior and their decision to move here. There are people who won't move here because of our utility. There are smart people who are informed and watch the news, and so they see the rate parity, but still, it's just kind of sketchy, so they won't move here. They'll move somewhere outside of our service area if they're aware of our service area, but they won't move into the city. Now, here's the thing. So we can't just mimic the terms that FPL provides to their customers. We have to be more generous to our customers than FPL is, because we have something to correct for and FPL doesn't. We have a bad reputation, so we can't do things like randomly take away, or put moratoriums on solars. Again, black eye the city, unnecessary. We can't do things like start to enforce these provisions that have long been unenforced in a way that hurts our residents. What we're doing is we're alienating our residents. We give ourselves an unnecessary black eye. And for what? And here's the thing. I'm looking at this historical collection data by year, and it was quoted in the news, $1.5 million back in 2012. That's fine. I'm sure, that number was given to, the news media. But if you look at this historical data, every single year, the numbers that we have in collection gets lower and lower, from 1.5 million to 805,000 to 590,000 to 586,000 to 536,000. You get a little blip up, 616,000, now 470,000, right? So here we are with a solution in search of a problem, because the problem is actually getting less worse every year. It's getting less bad every year. So I don't really see the need to put this retroactive deposit thing in place. I understand FP&L has a system whereby after a second, mispayment or whatever, or shut off or whatever, that they do that. In my opinion, we need to be more generous to our customers, to our residents, than FPL is, because we have lots of things to correct for. I'm not for this retroactively adjusting the deposits. I think it's we don't have to do that. We've seen the numbers improve without us doing that. We cannot do that.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. The one item that jumps out of the page that really concerns me, and I was part of the 2012 resolution. And I want to thank Commissioner Hardy for reminding us that our losses have gone down every year. That was the entire intent of what we did in 2012. We were getting beaten out of God. I think at one point we had $15 million or something on the books. It was a ridiculous amount of money. And what people, I'm sure, would understand if they thought about it is, well, that's $15 million that somebody's got to pay for. And that gets reflected in the rates. Okay, so I think we've in a large part accomplished what we set out to do in 2012. The one thing that jumps off the page, though, with this new, or if you want to call it, update to the resolution is item number 1, that would require all utility accounts to be in the property owner's name, ensuring a lien on the property for delinquent utility accounts. Now, I know we've had a lot of conversation about this in the past because we have a disproportionate amount of rental properties, more so than most communities. And we struggle with rental licenses. We struggle with code enforcement in some cases. And a lot of that has been because utilities historically were in the name of the property owner. So we never knew that they were actually renting, number one, and we never knew if the renter turned over, number two. So I'm not in favor of having the property owner. I think it's very effective that the tenant has to come in to utilities to identify themselves on their own credit worthiness or whatever to establish utility service. I do not want the property owners, in some cases, those that want to play the system, to be able to game the system by having utilities in their name and fly under the radar as far as their responsibility and obligation to have a rental license and be code compliant. Thank you.
I too agree with you. I'm not comfortable with number one. I sit in on most of the special magistrate meetings, and a lot of the issues come from, rentals and not establishing that they are rentals until the last minute because, they don't want to pay and they don't want to bring their properties up. So I have a problem with one. I want to go back to a comment that was made about bringing up the past. I'm the native in the room, one of them, and I'm going to always bring up a past because we were in a bad place when I was growing up here. And I want to remember and remind where we came from, and issues of not collecting money was a big issue when I first got elected. And I can't speak for Commissioner Maxwell, but I know that we were really concerned about all the money that wasn't collected. And we could go back in that situation because people don't have deposits. And we looked at it in 2012 and said, people need to have deposits because they get 2, 3, 4 months. They were getting 4 to 5 months in not paying utilities. And especially if you're a commercial property. There was a property not that long ago just west of the city that paid utilities. And when they left and went out of business, they owed us $16,000. That's crazy. So, and that's your tax dollars. That's your money not being collected. So, I think we need to look at it. I have no problem putting, 6 months, a year to play catch up. Some people cannot afford it. However, we need to make sure that we're getting the deposits for people that are walking away and leaving the city. And yes, the debt's going down, but 8 years ago, the debt was, a lot more. So, we just need to be careful and watch it. And I want to thank staff for all their hard work and looking at it and bringing it to our attention because, again, it has gone down. So that means we're doing the right work and the right job, but we need to make sure, and that's what staff's here for. Staff's here to look at those and monitor it and bring it to us when it comes to their attention. Commissioner Maxwell?
Thank you. Also, I'd like to speak to item number 2. Just for my own edification. We're still using online.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think I need to clarify something before we go further down the road with this discussion. The agenda item that I think you're looking at, Commissioner Maxwell, The 1 through 5 is what the Electric Utility considered in bringing this item forward. If you actually look at the resolution in your backup, the only thing that's proposed to change is to change the current process of returning residential deposits.
Okay.
So what would happen is if this resolution is approved, we would no longer return residential deposits. It would be just like the commercial deposit situation, where once you final your account and it's paid in full, then we return the deposit. What also wouldn't change is the current practice that's now being enforced, that if someone had their deposit, a residential customer had their deposit returned, but then they ran into issues with payment or what have you, that we could go back to them and say, okay, now you have to repay your deposit. With keeping that process in place, what the utilities will do is also give them up to 6 months to repay that deposit, which is the one administrative order that was issued to sort of clarify, give them some time to make up that deposit. So I'm just trying to clarify what really is that issue.
Thank you. May I continue?
Yep, you got a little bit more clarity there?
Sure, I can see clearly now.
You can see clearly now?
Anyway, on item number 2, I want to remind everybody that when we did this resolution in 2012, the biggest problem we were dealing with, in addition to the mega millions of dollars in uncollected utility bills, was that we had a security deposit policy that was at best antiquated, in that every single property owner, every residential customer in our system paid the same amount for a security deposit. And I believe that was $235. I believe maybe it was $165 or something like that. Well, that means if you lived in a condo, your deposit was $235. If you lived in a McMansion, your deposit was $235. And one of the biggest reasons we were getting beat is because some of the folks in the McMansions, they were running up, I'll just pick a number, a $600 utility bill, but they only had a $235 deposit. So the purpose of what we did in 2012 was to kind of true this all up and say, looky, if this piece of property, if this residential piece of property normally has $300 worth of usage, then shouldn't it be reasonable that we would have a deposit that covers that usage? And the answer was yes. And that's where we are, and that's how this policy, this resolution was built around. Now, you're absolutely right. The idea that if somebody had their deposit returned, and then they're going to have to, unfortunately, pay a deposit back into the system, and that deposit would be reflective, of course, of their usage. Let's see, what else do I want to say about that? I guess that's just about it. But like I said, I'm very, I don't want to use the word proud because that's not really the right word, but this resolution for 2012 was sorely needed, and it's been very effective and helped us very much. I consider that what we're going through right now is a little bit of a tweaking measure, and it is unfortunate, and especially now that we are pretty darn close as far as FP&L, as far as our costs are concerned. I guess you could argue 5 years ago that folks could be really in a big pinch when it comes to the utility bills because they were paying more. But now we're on par, and a dollar's a lot of money if you don't have it. But we have a business to run, and if people have special circumstances, I know I've heard of many stories where they've come to the utility department and worked something out, and that's really what we're looking for, is that communication. We're not looking to cut anybody's power off. But the last question I have for utilities, and that is, if we put somebody into a situation where they have to increase their deposit over, let's say, 6 months, they need that 6-month period, what do we do? What's the trigger point to disconnect if for some reason they're not keeping up with the next bill and the next bill and the next bill, plus their added deposit? At what point do we cut our losses?
Oh, that I'm not aware that has actually happened yet. If we do seek to put customers who are in these extreme situations in touch with other agencies that could help them. If we get to something that's really extreme and tough, we're human beings too.
No, that's not what I'm getting at. I'm not talking about somebody that's trying to work with our system. I'm talking about, look, let's be honest, there are people out there that will game the system. And if they can get away with it, they're going to get away with it. My question is, at what point do we shut them down?
It would have to be the next time that they don't pay a bill. We'd have to do something, and then if the customer raises the issue, that would then be escalated through the channels that.
But remember, the deposit that we have on file, it hopefully is, equal or very much equal to what their usage is. So we don't, no, that's not the case?
It depends on when the account was established. The deposit could be still well below what their current usage is.
Okay. Well, what's that?
Hold on.
Right. Hold on. Staff, Joel points out that if it's within the 6 months and we haven't yet recouped the deposit they were to go to, we're still behind. Unfortunately, we'd have to cut them off.
Okay. As long as we have a policy and then that we stick to that consistent policy for everybody.
We're trying to be consistent, and it's, I would always get the credit for it, but it's very difficult to have to disconnect somebody because we don't know who we think might be gaming the system or who we think is really in a very tough situation in life, and we're.
I get that.
But
we are referring them to social services that we have available to us. We are referring them. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Did I understand?
Did you want to speak, or were you on the phone?
I was doing some math.
Okay. It's your turn. Hold on. It's Commissioner Hardy's turn.
I will cede the floor for the moment to the commissioner who hasn't spoken on this issue.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm trying to understand, are we going to shut somebody off if they miss a payment on the deposit payment, if they're still paying the bill or their usage? We're going to shut them off.
It's my understanding it's all on one bill. So either they've made the payment or they haven't. It's all, they can't, my understanding is that they can't segregate what portion of the bill is going to which account, which particular service. It's one bill from the city.
I think we should create a policy where we're trying to recoup a deposit, but if they got into trouble anyhow, I'm not interested in shutting them off if they're going to make a payment on the bill and not be able to make a payment on the required deposit to establish an extension of a payment or something. But if they're making a payment on their usage, I wouldn't want to see them shut off.
But there are, like Commissioner Maxwell was referring to, there are organizations in Palm Beach County that will help people pay their utilities if they get into a situation.
We're creating a situation.
There are organizations that pay, the utility deposits for them, and I know quite a few people in the city of Lake Worth take advantage of that. It is offered to all Palm Beach County citizens. Commissioner Hardy?
The first thing that I'll say is, if we're worried about credit risk, who has like the least credit risk are people who are net metering.
Oh, come on.
They have the least credit risk because, they tend not to owe us much money. The other thing is that I don't know why we're doing this right now. And the reason why is I just, 2012, we're at 1.59 million, 1.595 million going out to collections. 2018, we're at $470,000. It's like a 70% reduction.
What would be a good number that we would be at?
Well, what I would say is we've seen a 70% reduction in the amount of debt that we sent out to collections, and this has not been enforced, right? And so if you acknowledge those two things, collections have lessened. If you acknowledge that collections have lessened, even though we're not enforcing this, then you have to ask, well, what's like the big urgent thing that we have to do right now? And it's not really much. So, what I would say is, the other thing is by enforcing this, what happened was people rightly got upset. They went to the news media, which is probably what I would do if I felt helpless and if I felt I was getting shafted by my government. And the news media reported on this. And you know what people feel about this city and its utility yet again? Lake Worth Utilities, here we go again, right? And, all the good things that we've done over the past and, all the good things that you've done, in the mind of the public, you eroded some of that goodwill. right, by enforcing this policy. And so, you know, what I would do is, first of all, I know that there's a motion on the floor to accept this, which, you know, involves us not refunding deposits when people pay, you know, 25 consecutive months and, you know, all this stuff. I wonder if anyone would like to withdraw their second on that, or if anyone would like some amendments, for example, that we wouldn't shut off someone's power if they're paying the bill, but they're not paying the deposit portion of the bill. These are things that I personally would like to see. I just don't see a need for that. Things are getting better every year as far as this standpoint is. And, you know, as far as the history goes, you know, I'm not a native. I grew up in Broward and went to school in Miami-Dade County. But at the same time, it's one thing to look at your history and say, oh, you know, how far we've come. But what I find is, you know, elected officials who have been in office for a while like to look at their history to kind of, you know, make an argumentative move that says there are things that need to be done, but look at how much we've done already. No one cares about that. Like the people who
I
haven't.
disagree with you.
Okay, well, you know, the people who don't move into the city, and you know, the phone calls that I got from my friends, right, about Lake Worth, I'm taking grief, you know, from my friends about Lake Worth and all. You know, there goes your, you know, your utilities again. When I go into the long story about how much the city's been through, it's like they shut off. It's like Charlie Brown, want, right? And so, what, frankly, I would like to see less of from all of us up here is discussion about how much we've done over the last 8 years, because that's in the past. You know, and I know the Lion King's out right now, right? The past is in the past. Okay, we need to talk about all the things that we need to do right now, because we're still, frankly, not winning the battle for new residents, especially younger residents that are affluent, that have money to spend. We're not winning that battle right now, and things like what we saw in the news the other day is one of the reasons why. So we gave ourselves a black eye, and for no good reason that I can discern.
Duly noted. City Manager.
Let me talk about the present, because that is a true
Can we talk
statement.
about the
Most people-
future?
And the future. A lot of the reasons that you're seeing the cleanup of these policies and the good job that staff is doing, granted, these are things that give us a black eye because nobody likes to see people held to standards that are really across any utility. You live in any utility, you have a phone, you don't pay your bills, you pay late, there are consequences. Shame on us for not enforcing it for as long as we had these things on the books. But going to the future, and you guys know this, there's a SHRIP program that's about to land on your desk for public decisions. And I can tell you, in working with Finance Department and our financial advisor and looking to go out to borrow money to do these things, the tie line that's on here for night for design, and the actual improvements to make our utility as reliable to be among the best in the state is going to cost money. Every dollar matters. How you run your business and the credibility of that activity is scrutinized and matters. And it matters in the cost of money. That's your future. It's not glamorous. It's not a thing that people looking to the city necessarily are going to say, hey, I want to move there. They're actually fixing something that's been broke for 40 years. I'm sorry to go back in the past. But it does matter. How we run our business matters. And I don't like making people angry. I don't like standing up in front of TV cameras constantly talking about these kinds of things as if somehow we're doing something bad. We're enforcing policy that's standard procedure in most utilities. Deposits and how you don't pay your bill in FP&L territory, they cut you off. They raise and reassess your deposit amount. That's what we're trying to do here, and we're trying to tighten up our business practices to be a better investment so that we can borrow money and leverage our business to fix this system so that we don't hand it on to the next generation who's going to look back at us and say, they didn't do their job. That's our future. We're trying to catch up in a lot of ways to build a solid foundation, and that's why we find ourselves in this mess. We apologize on behalf of staff in the ham-handed measure and way we come forward with this, that it doesn't play well in the press or among people who are affected by it. I apologize. I wish I could had the the luxury of focus, time, effort, and energy to go and sit down with everyone and talk them through. But the fact of the matter is, we got to fix this, and we got to fix it on the fly, and we need to get this done. So that's your future.
I'm going to go to the public. Janet Serrano. Mike, we need the mic again, please.
The mic.
No, we need it for public record. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet Serrano, 413 North L Street, Lake Worth Beach. I agree with Vice Mayor or City Commissioner Maxwell that I don't think it's a good idea for the city to require the accounts to be put in the property owner's name. I think it's the tenant's responsibility. It should remain. I'm talking into, oh, I guess I wasn't, sorry. I don't agree. I agree that the account should not be put in the property owner's name and that we should not be putting a lien against them when it's not paid. It is the tenant's responsibility. It's also the property owner's responsibility, the landlord's responsibility to vet those tenants as closely as he can to ensure that they won't have delinquent accounts, but in a real world, that's not always possible. At the same time, I think it's a fiscally sound idea, as City Manager Borstein pointed out, to keep those deposits until the tenant closes their account. There's no reason why we shouldn't do that. As to the matter of increasing deposits, if you don't pay on time or if you bounce checks to the city, then yes, I think your deposit should be increased to cover your bills. And I support the idea of allowing those payments to be made over a period of time for those who it's a really economic hardship for. But I applaud the city for the good business practice of putting this policy into effect. We should have been doing it all along. We could have collected some of that money we lost, that 1.5 million starting 7 years ago. And Lord knows we need all the money we can get in Lake Worth. And it's really not fair to us who pay our bills on time to have to absorb those delinquent accounts, which we will eventually do because the city's going to have to raise rates if they don't get the money they need. Thank you for considering the resolution.
Thank you. Sheila, did you want to talk on this issue too? Okay, followed by Janet Ives.
I pay my bill on time. For 4 years. Can you hear me? Okay. For 4 years, I have paid my bill on time. No late payments. I, in fact, will pay the next month's bill if I see it online as I'm paying the current bill. So I stay a step ahead. There's a word, passo avanti, in Italian, means a step ahead. So I try to stay a step ahead. I received a $700 bill for a deposit. For someone who has been paying her bills on time, that is obscene. So I looked. It's supposed to be 2.5 months worth of bills. I pay $90 a month. So you tell me, who is the smart person who decided that this person owes $700 in an additional deposit? $700. Where am I going to get that? When I went to the utility company, first of all, the person who's in charge of customer service never returns a call. In the 6 years I've lived here in the city, never returns a phone call to me. Do you know how many times I've called that person? A dozen? Maybe 20? Never returns a call. That's obscene. Customer service is supposed to serve the customer. And it's about damn time they start doing that. I sent an attorney to the utility company, who is a friend of mine. He did this pro bono, but he spoke on my behalf. And he got this bill reduced to $300. Guess what? That's still $70 more supposedly owed if I'm going to be paying 2.5 months.
Thank you. Janet Ives? Janet still here? Peggy Fisher? Followed by Ramsey Stevens.
Peggy Fisher, 508 North A Street. I sat in this room in 2013 when 3 people who are on the dais, 2 who are here now, 1 who is not, were part of the commission who approved this resolution and put it in place. And the same city manager was here too. If you all don't have confidence that resolutions that you think are going to benefit this city and the people who live in it, which is what your job is to do, is to serve us, because ultimately we are your bosses. If you don't have confidence that the policies that you are setting are going to be put into practice, then we as citizens have a problem. You know, this is 2013. That's 6 years ago. With our net metering, we have a resolution that was 7 years ago. Now, we don't have a completely new staff in the utility department. I know we've had turnovers. I've seen utility directors come and go. I've seen other people come and go. But there have been people that have been there for a long time, as have you, some of you. So let's step back and say, we have to run this city a little better. I do not appreciate anyone sitting up here and saying that anyone in this audience is ignorant, naive, has amnesia. We're property owners, we're residents, we're voters in this city. And our taxes and the things we do in this city, besides owning property, shopping, doing whatever, puts money into the city that pays people's salary. And you all need to remember that. Thank you.
Ramsey Stevens.
Good evening again, Your Honors. Speaking again as a member of the Utility Advisory Board, I'd just like to make 2 technical suggestions that if you do, for some reason, move forward with no longer giving back people their deposits at all, maybe meet in the middle ground and do a step-down system. You know, if you've been paying your utility bill for 10 years, you should be able to get your deposits back. And then on the flip side, if for some reason you do get penalized and you have to put a larger deposit down, try and amortize that out as much as possible, and don't have anyone who's been paying their bill on time lose power because they get a surprise deposit at all, right? I think that's where a lot of the frustration in this room is. But if you do have to put more money down, give them the ability to amortize it out, because as you know, we have a lot of people on fixed income, and an $800 bill that comes out of, you know, the thin air is just not digestible. And then another thing that came up at the Utility Advisory Board meeting was the status of our current Care to Share program. That's kind of in limbo. We asked the director to specifically kind of chase down where that program is, where its funds are, and maybe we should be reinvigorating that more aggressively. And then generally speaking, I think it's worth paying attention to what Commissioner Hardy said. There are ways for us to embrace things like net metering, community solar, demand response that will be profitable for the utility, help the utility be economically sustainable over term, and will return more money to the people of Lake Worth. The 2 can go hand in hand. We can have a profitable utility and use our utility to save people money. So thank you.
Ryan Oblender.
Hello, Ryan Oblender, 1702 North A Street. As a member of the Electric Utility Advisory Board, I know we had a bumpy road getting to where we met last last time, but thank you for finally getting us there. The problem I had was that I couldn't talk on half of the discussion, but that's an ethics thing. But we only got backup the day before the meeting because of the timeliness of this meeting. So it was hard to get all the information and questions prepared for the deposits section in time to actually have a good meeting for the EUAB. Granted, we didn't have a quorum, so we only had a workshop, so we didn't actually vote on anything in particular. I just want to mention a couple of things that came up in case you weren't there. That after we had the net metering discussion, they had the presentation about all the different deposits and things like that. But they were talking about drafting a resolution and just getting some input on the resolution. And so we saw these things. Some items on that resolution weren't actually brought forward for discussion, so some members of the public were surprised by them, obviously. But after the presentation was over, we asked to look into the care to share section of the bill. Some people actually donate to that section that could be used towards some non-payment accounts. I don't know what the current numbers are because they weren't available at the time of the presentation, which I think that would have been important to see. But if they're small, they're small. It's something. But otherwise, I was looking at the deposit requirements. If there were to go to lifelong deposit requirements for residential, I just want to make sure that the Section 6 on interest is adhered to. I know we have a history of not really adhering to what we have in resolutions, but the resolutions do have clear things of how to give back interest monies every October. Another thing would be commercial deposits. Sometimes it's unfair that a commercial building has an operation that has high utility usage, so the next person who goes in there has a high deposit. What if you have a Bitcoin mining operation one year, they close up shop, and now you have a stationary store, and the deposits just aren't lined up. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Maxwell?
Thank you.
I don't have one from you, but come on up.
You see your card?
She had one in for the other one, but
Another one, probably not as completely. Tammy Panza, 160 North L. I just wanted to applaud you guys for not doing the please put the tenants' bills in the name of the landlords, because frankly, landlords have enough difficulty with their tenants sometimes. They go beyond their own deposit, so we shouldn't have to be responsible for other people's issues. I wanted to address, we're continually saying that the FPL is, we're concurrent with FPL or same, everything's same. But I know that one of the people that was actually in the TV recently is a member of the non-municipal Lake Worth Utility Service. I don't believe that the non-municipal residential service is required to be equal to FP&L. So that person is constantly barraged with huge, ridiculous, horrible, unbelievable electric bills. And for her to maybe be twice late in a long period of time and to get saddled with this bill, you have an astronomically huge bill multiplied by 2.5, is it? So we also have the people who try to come to Lake Worth, love the city. You have the businesses, and sometimes they're required to put 6 months ahead. Now, all I can say is that, to me, it's a management issue. How do you get $16,000 behind without shutting off the electricity first? It's got to be more than 1 month, unless you're, I don't know, Joe Pizza 24 hours a day service.
They were huge.
So that needs to stop. That's management. That's not, okay, we're going to make someone who's on Social Security making $800 a month pay $950 deposit, or you're going to turn granny off. That's not right. And these are not only, and I know that we are not equal to FP&L because we don't include our fuel charge. So that's always more. And recently the FP&L came down. So we are not equal right now. So address the non-municipalities, the businesses, the ones that aren't required to be by ordinance equal to FP&L. Thank you.
Mr. Maxwell?
Thank you. A couple of new ideas or thoughts that just came to mind. First of all, Ed, could you provide a list of these social services and their contact information to each of the 5 of us? So when people call us, we can save ourselves a phone call, and reach out, give the folks the information.
Yes, we'll get you that information.
And the other thing that just came to mind, and I don't recall this resolution verbatim as to what you actually have to do to put yourself in jeopardy, but do we have a system in place that when you start tripping those lines, those benchmarks or whatever, to put you maybe into Dutch, are we set? Is there something triggered on their electric bill that says, "Hey, Mrs. Smith, be aware that you've been late. If you're late again, or if that's the way it is, we're going to increase your deposit"? I think there needs to be a heads up in the utility bill when folks start hitting those different, whatever that criteria is. And I do kind of like the idea of, getting if you've been here for 10 years, we didn't talk about this in 2012, but let's think about that. If you've been with us for 10 years and you've been a good customer and you haven't tripped the wire or whatever, I don't think I have a real big heartburn, with that. I mean, how many people, think about it, in this city have been here for 10 years or more? Most of these going to be homeowners. Okay? So I don't have a heartburn. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels about that, but I think 10 years is a good benchmark, to give the deposits back. It's a real tough conversation to have because, we were all, I know when I was coming up as a young adult, scratching money to first, last, and security just to get an apartment or a roommate, and then get an apartment, a deposit for the phone, a deposit for this and the electric. That could be a chore. But unfortunately, like the city manager said earlier, we are running a business here, and we do have some mechanism in place to help people if they'll simply raise their hand and say they could use some help. And this is not dissimilar from, you've heard me talk about this a gazillion times with code enforcement. Somebody gets in a code enforcement bind, instead of ignoring the process, raise your hand, work with the code officer, and work out a plan. Same applies for our utility customers. And if they don't keep their end of the bargain, then boom, you shut them off. But I don't want anybody to perceive that we're being cold or heartless. We're really not doing anything more stringent or more arduous than any other utility company in Florida, or for that matter, the country. So with that, I'd like to get a vote on this.
Mr. Hardy?
I'll make a comment about the backup. Again, we got this like 20 minutes ago or 30 minutes ago. This obviously was something that we would have liked to be able to study before getting here. It wasn't available to the public, and it wasn't available to us until literally after the meeting started. That's not really acceptable. The other thing is, the bit about social services. I've actually sat at the desk at a local nonprofit and had to answer the phone where people are calling and asking for social. I've actually had to do that. And what I can tell you is, while there are organizations out there like Community Action that will help you pay your utility bill or your deposit, there's not enough money out there to take care of everybody who needs it. Okay, so while we are promulgating policy on the idea that there are charitable organizations out there that can pick up our slack, there's just not enough money out there to help all the people who need it. That's number two. Number three is, and this is really important, if I'm already struggling to pay my bill and I'm already a credit risk to the city, do I not become more of a credit risk if the city puts an onerous adjustment on me, right? So like, I'm already a credit risk. Now the city says, I have to come up with $800 over the next 6 months. So my ability, every time I make that extra payment to the deposit, my ability to make the next payment decreases, right? So we might be exacerbating the problem that we're trying to solve. That's number three. And then the other thing is, I just don't feel this is worth it, right? And the utility has done, the utility has made some progress as far as rates. We're at parity with FP&L. Wonderful thing. We had a press conference here in this room about it. We championed that. We put that message out there. And a year or two later, whatever it is, whatever the distance is, here we are giving ourselves a black eye. And, we have a reporter in the room here who is going to undoubtedly do a story about this. And at night, when people watch the news, they're going to see a story about Lake Worth Utilities alienating their customers and giving themselves a black eye. And what they're going to say is, there's Lake Worth again. There's Lake Worth Utilities. And that's going to affect the way, obviously, that they think about this city. And it's going to affect their decisions whether or not they want to move into the city in the future if things do pick up here. And what I want to know is, was it worth it? I don't think so. I really, particularly when you see and hear the trend for the accounts that we send to collection decreasing by 70% from 2012. So from 2012, you see a 70% reduction in the amount of debt that we send to collections, and yet this is when we enforce it, when we finally have some momentum and a positive storyline. This is not the appropriate time to do this. What should have happened was staff should have come back with a resolution or an amendment to this resolution that would have adjusted this in a way that's favorable to our residents, not in a way that alienates them. And that's, it is. I don't want to vote for this, which has to do with whether or not people get their, utility bills, their deposits back. 25 straight payments. If you do that, to me, you're okay. You're okay. I'm okay with giving them back their deposits. Also, this policy about the retroactively adjusting their deposits, it's more onerous than FPLs. They require 2 shutoffs. And in our policy, we would do it after 1. So, and again, I think we have to be more generous than FPL because our reputation is worse. Our reputation is worse than FPL. We should take special care to treat our customers generously.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yeah, I'm listening to Commissioner Hardy very closely, and I thank him for acknowledging the fact that we've got better over the years. But I'm trying to figure out in my mind how doing nothing, if somebody defaults or is having trouble paying their bill, I'm having trouble understanding how that puts us in a better place in the future. And what would you suggest we do? And you're absolutely right. That's how our world works. The worse you are as a credit risk, the higher interest rates you pay, or there's more penalties or whatever that go along with that. I've always wondered how that works, because you're just strapping somebody that's already in a bad place to begin with, but that's unfortunately how it works. What would your recommendation be to the person that's chronically late? And remember, if we have to shut them off, there is a cost to the utility to shut them off and turn them back on. So that's an additional burden, financial burden on the utility. So what would you suggest for, and if you're not going to have a penalty for folks that don't pay their bills, then why have a deposit for anybody?
Sure.
One more pass.
Okay. Well, under Robert's rules, when there are 2 people with opposing views, the chair is to let the floor alternate between the 2 people. But
I'd like to weigh in on here.
Okay, that's cool.
I'm running the meeting. Thank you.
We've gone over the 30 minutes.
Absolutely.
We're almost at an hour.
Motion to extend. Actually, you know what? This should go to a workshop. I withdraw my motion.
There's already a motion on the floor.
Well, someone has to have a motion to extend. In order for us to have a vote, that motion would have to be seconded and then voted on.
Do you recognize the motion?
No. Attorney?
Well, if we've gone over the 30 minutes, then by your existing rules, if it's not extended, this has to go to a work session.
Okay.
Oh, yes, hold on. There's already a motion on the floor. And I asked 10 minutes ago that we take a vote on this.
You didn't call the question.
Is there a second on the motion
Yes.
to extend?
Yes, there is.
Oh, no, not to extend.
I withdrew my motion.
Okay, so we need another motion.
Extend.
Is there a motion to extend?
30 minutes.
Is there a second?
I don't know what you folks think you are accomplishing by this maneuver.
It's being moved to a workshop. I'm just going to have the final say since everybody's got quite a few passes.
Unbelievable.
Yes, there are reporters in the room, and I hope that one of your lines would be that the city of Lake Worth Beach and its staff is working hard to do what's best for all parties that are in the city of Lake Worth, and that we are working to move forward and representing all the people, even the people that have to pick up the utility bills, yes, we have done a lot better, but it depends on who you talk to, whether we're allowed to talk about the past or the future. And I like to talk about it all. So as we move forward, I want to thank staff for doing a great job in bringing all options and looking at all the issues on behalf of all the citizens of the Lake Worth. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, sorry, City Manager.
Just before you do that, I strongly would advise you to go back and look at the consent agenda. You have a 10-year extension on the transportation for gas services, which expires, and we have to give them a year in advance notice, and this is your shot to do that. So of all the things on the consent agenda, I don't know about the others up there, but
City
I know
Attorney?
that one's a sensitive, time-sensitive issue.
Certainly that FTS contract, Firm Transportation Service contract on the FGT system is absolutely critical. We've done business deals that require that be renewed.
Commissioner Hardy?
By when must this be renewed?
It's August 2020, but you have to give them a year's advance notice.
August 1.
So here's another question. Why is this coming to us the day before? Like if I have a contract that has to be renewed a year in advance, why are you like this is the 11th hour and you're bringing this to us?
This is.
And you also packaged it with controversial items on the consent agenda?
Staff doesn't know that.
They're not deciding what's controversial.
This is a contract which the city has renewed year over year over year. It's Firm Transportation Service. It's how we deliver fuel to the city gate. Without it, we don't have rights to move fuel on the pipeline system. So this is a standard contract that's issued by pipelines that all customers who move gas in the pipeline sign. Staff strongly advises that this be renewed.
Madam Attorney, under Robert's rules, can I make a motion to approve one part of the consent agenda, but not other parts of the consent agenda? Can we, for example, take this out?
No.
I don't know what Robert's Rules of Order would say on it. Under your guys' rules and procedure, it's not addressed. The meeting has not been adjourned yet, so I think if there was a motion to consider this one consent item, it would just be a motion that whether the chair was going to allow it under the chair's oversight of the meeting, and there was a second, it could proceed.
Question, is there more than one in this consent agenda that needs to move forward in staff's?
Well, obviously, Vice Mayor, we'd like to see them all move forward,
Yes, but this one has priority. Is there anything else in there that has priority?
The engineering for the dry line, the ENCO agreement, just
Commissioner Maxwell?
Thank you. I don't think it would be proper to pull an item because we would have had to pull the item prior. So pulling it now would be inappropriate. We already approved, or we already passed on the consent agenda. We had an opportunity for additions, deletions, and reordering, and we already voted on that.
Motion to reconsider?
So I think the alternative would be a motion to reconsider the consent agenda as a whole.
Yeah, motion to reconsider the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it contingent that we voted on the last item on the agenda.
No.
Is there that's the second?
That's my second.
Okay.
You can't pick and
No,
choose.
no,
You can't pick and choose.
that's
You want to
not-
have a meeting and do the business, or we're not going to have a meeting and do the business. What do you want to do?
My understanding is that when you second a motion, you can't like second it and amend it. I made the
Okay,
motion.
right.
And he
So-
basically amended it.
Mr. Chair, if I may. So the motion is to reconsider the consent agenda as a whole.
Right.
Commissioner Maxwell, if you would like to second it but request an amendment to the motion, you may do so.
Okay, I'd like to request an amendment.
And you
Okay.
would have to agree.
I do not agree.
Okay, so then currently there's a motion with no second on the floor.
Correct.
Does anyone second the motion to reconsider the consent agenda as a whole?
So that we can get this FTS thing done.
My question to the city manager is, could it ask to have an extension and bring it back at our first meeting?
I'll second the motion. This is getting
Okay,
silly.
it's saying,
You
staff
know,
is saying no.
Okay. So
Motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so now we are reconsidering the full consent agenda.
I thought that's what we did.
I would like to.
It was the motion to reconsider the full
Okay.
consent agenda. So now we need to take a motion actually on the full consent agenda.
So, I'm sorry, when you said, well, no, okay, so I believe, oh, this is terrible. When I made the motion to reconsider the consent agenda, what I thought I made the motion to do was to basically reconsider certain items in the consent agenda, like to give us the opportunity to break up the consent agenda into controversial and non-controversial parts.
My understanding, and I'm sorry, was that your motion was to reconsider the consent agenda as it currently exists with all items on the consent agenda.
Can I make a motion to divide the question?
Dividing the question. That's not how it works.
Well, right now, we have the ability to reconsider the consent agenda as a full agenda. So if someone makes that motion in second, they can approve the consent agenda with all items on it. If that motion fails for lack of second, then you could make your motion to consider individual items.
Well, you have that motion in a second.
And we voted on it.
To reconsider the full consent agenda.
Yeah.
But do we have an actual motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Is there discussion on this?
Nope.
No.
We'd need a second.
Are you willing to second?
Yes.
The
Motion now to divide.
Did he
Can't do that.
second the motion to
Herman
approve
seconded
the?
motion to approve.
Yes. So right now, we have a motion in second to approve the consent agenda.
Correct.
We've talked about a second tie line.
Yeah, we've talked
for
about
a long
it,
time.
but this is.
We're up against a deadline on one.
Let's pass that one.
But also the tie line, you know, we talked about it in the solar program, that, you know, the quicker we get the tie line up, the quicker we can, you know.
It shouldn't have been on the
soften
consent
solar.
agenda.
Excuse me.
Well, we don't have the ability to talk about any items on consent. And in my opinion, we've talked about it enough with staff that we're going to move forward, at least for a study on the expenses of a second tie line.
Mr. Maxwell? Did you have your light on?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Motion carries 3-1.
Okay, now I have a motion to reconsider the last item on the agenda.
Motion to reconsider last agenda item. Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion adjourned.
Oh my gosh.
That was painful.